What if the story of your life is not unfolding forward, but being edited from behind the curtain of tomorrow? Imagine walking through your days believing memory is a record, only to discover it may be an invention, rewritten not by what has been, but by what is still waiting ahead. Neuroscience whispers that the brain predicts before it perceives, and physics teases us with experiments where choices ripple backward. Déjà vu, sudden instincts, the eerie feeling you already knew. These may not be accidents of mind, but evidence that the future is quietly reaching back, shaping the path you believe you've walked. Tonight, as you listen, allow yourself to drift into this unsettling possibility that your past is not fixed, and your future may already be editing the very beginning of your story. Footsteps before arrival. You walk into a room, and before your foot even lands on the ground, you feel as though you've already stepped there. The air carries a weight you cannot explain, as if someone, or perhaps some version of you, has already crossed that threshold. The echo of your movement seems to arrive a split second before the sound of your step. It feels impossible, but what if the impossible is simply the truer shape of time? In the ordinary story we tell ourselves, life is a straight line, past produces present, present creates future. But physics, that stubborn rebel, keeps erasing the simplicity. Certain equations, especially in the strange theater of quantum mechanics, work equally well forward and backward. A photon fired toward a mirror doesn't decide its path until an observer locks it into place, and sometimes, unnervingly, the experiment suggests the decision travels backward, rewriting the moment of emission. It is as though the future trajectory had always been the cause. You may have felt this in your body without ever needing an equation. Think of intuition, the sense that something will happen before it does, the odd feeling of anticipating footsteps on the stairs before anyone arrives. Science brushes against this too. Studies on anticipatory physiology show subtle spikes in skin conductance, tiny shivers in the nervous system, seconds before a random future event is revealed on a screen. The body knows something it should not yet know, a trembling acknowledgement of footsteps that have not yet fallen. This is where memory itself begins to wobble. If your nervous system reacts to something before it occurs, when does that response enter the archive of the mind? Is it tagged as past, as present, or as some strange hybrid category, a memory seeded from the future, pretending to have already been there? The narrative we live by insists that memories are stored after experience. But what if some memories are pre-written, waiting to align with the moment when the world finally catches up? Walk through this slowly, like retracing steps on a staircase that seems to have no bottom. When you recall an event from childhood, you imagine it came from long ago, yet the neural patterns of remembering are not photographs of the past, they are reconstructions assembled in the moment. Each recollection is a rewriting. If your brain is already reconstructing, what stops the blueprint from being influenced not only by fragments of the past, but also by signals from the future? Your foot hits the ground, but perhaps the echo has been waiting there all along. This possibility does not shatter reality. It thickens it. Instead of a thin arrow stretching forward, time becomes layered, recursive, folded like fabric. The footsteps you hear may not belong to who you were, but to who you are about to become. And when that future self steps forward, its weight is heavy enough to ripple backward, rearranging how you recall the path you took to arrive. Think of stories, a novel where the ending changes how you remember the beginning. The first chapters do not alter on the page, but your interpretation does. What once seemed casual detail now glows with foreshadowing. In the same way, your life may be a narrative being edited by its final pages. Your future steps, the destinations you have not yet reached, may already be whispering into the corridors of your memory, giving shape to what you think has already been walked. And so the room you enter feels familiar, not because you've been there before, but because the future version of you has already passed through it, sending the echo backward to greet you. Footsteps before arrival, memory before experience, cause bending to effect. The rhythm of your life is no longer forward beats, but an overlapping pattern, a syncopation where past and future exchange roles in a quiet, endless dance. You cannot prove it in this moment. And yet, in some way you already knew this was coming. Choices already waiting. You like to think of choices as a moment of freedom, a crossroads where you stand, scanning possibilities, and then selecting a path. But what if those choices were already waiting for you, positioned in the future, like markers along a road that has already been drawn? What if you don't create the path by walking, but instead stumble into decisions that have been silently anticipating you, as though you are fulfilling a script that was written with invisible ink? This is the unsettling notion behind retrocausality, that events ahead may influence those behind. In experiments known as delayed choice, a particle behaves differently depending on measurements that occur after it has traveled. Imagine that, a choice not yet made reshaping behavior already completed. The implication lingers like smoke. Perhaps your choices too live in the future, and the actions you believe are freely chosen are simply alignments with outcomes that already existed. Philosophers have played with this puzzle for centuries. If destiny exists, free will becomes performance art, the illusion of selecting lines that were written long before you spoke them. But modern neuroscience introduces a more haunting detail. Brain scans show bursts of neural activity, seconds before you consciously decide. In other words, your choice is brewing, already set in motion, before the theater of your awareness catches up. You feel as though you decide in the present, but in truth, the decision is already waiting. Think of a time you flipped a coin, telling yourself that chance would dictate the result. The coin spins, it lands, and in the moment you see the outcome, you feel a tug, as though deep down you already knew which side you wanted. It wasn't a decision made in that instant. It was a recognition of something already embedded in the timeline of your preferences. Choice didn't arrive. It revealed itself. And what of regret? You look backward at the choices you've made and wonder what could have been. Yet regret feels like a shadow stretching from the future into the past, not the other way around. Why? Because regret is always shaped by outcomes that hadn't yet unfolded when you acted. The choice itself is remembered differently once the future drapes over it. That suggests that the meaning of a choice doesn't exist at the time you make it. It is constructed later, backward, colored by what has yet to occur. Imagine walking down a corridor of doors. You believe you are choosing which door to open. But in truth, the corridor was designed with only one door unlocked, the one you would inevitably push against. From your perspective, you deliberated. From time's perspective, you simply discovered. Choices already waiting, like statues in a dark gallery, illuminated one by one as you carry your lantern forward. This lens does not make life meaningless. On the contrary, it deepens the mystery. If choices are waiting in the future, then the self you are becoming is shaping the self you are now. The decision you believe you must make tomorrow may already be shaping the way you remember today. That upcoming conversation, the letter you may or may not send, the risk you will eventually take, these may already exist, and the echo of their presence is rippling backward, nudging you subtly toward them. Consider déjà vu, the eerie feeling that you've already lived through this moment. Most explain it as a neural glitch, a cross-wiring of memory. But what if it is something more radical? What if déjà vu is the conscious mind brushing against the outline of a future choice? What if you feel the uncanny because your awareness briefly aligns with the choices already waiting ahead, creating the sensation that the moment has been lived before? And so you return to your present life with this whisper. The choices you will make are already hanging in time like constellations. You cannot see all the stars at once, but they are there, fixed, glittering silently in the sky of your future. You walk beneath them, thinking you are deciding which way to turn, when in truth you are tracing patterns already written in light. The haunting question is not whether you are free, but whether freedom has ever meant what you thought it did. Perhaps freedom is not inventing choices but discovering them. Perhaps meaning is not forged in the moment of action, but in the recognition that the future, in its silent patience, has always been one step ahead, quietly rewriting the story of how you arrived here. And when you stand at the next crossroads feeling the weight of possibility, pause and wonder, are you choosing or are you stepping into a decision that was waiting for you all along? Echoes of tomorrow. You hear a sound faint at first, like a whisper sliding through the walls of your mind. It feels misplaced, as though it does not belong to the present. You pause, listening closer, and realize it is not the past speaking. It is the faint echo of something that has not yet arrived, a fragment of tomorrow seeping backward into your awareness. What does it mean to hear tomorrow before it comes? Think of an echo in reverse. Instead of your voice bouncing back after you call out, the reply arrives before you ever open your mouth. This is how some memories feel, as though you already knew them before they unfolded, as though time was not a river, but a vast chamber where sound collides in every direction. Science brushes against this mystery in small, fragile ways. In certain experiments, human brains register signals before stimuli are revealed. Heart rates, skin conductance, even the widening of pupils, they shift in anticipation, milliseconds before an unknown future event occurs. The body reacts before the mind believes it knows. It is not prophecy. It is physics whispering that time may not move as we assume. You may have experienced this yourself in sudden clarity. A phone vibrates, and before you even glance at the screen, you already know who is calling. A word slips from someone's mouth, and you realize you knew it would come before it was spoken. These are not grand visions. They are faint echoes, small leaks from a timeline that is not sealed. But the echoes do not always comfort. Sometimes they confuse, bending memory until you no longer know whether you recall the past or anticipate the future. Déjà vu is the most familiar example. You walk into a place, and it feels uncannily as though you've been there before. Yet, what if déjà vu is not the recycling of old memory, but the intrusion of an echo from what has yet to happen? You feel the shock not because the moment is old, but because it belongs to a future already humming in your nervous system. And here, in this quiet moment of listening, I want to ask you something directly, only once and only now. What time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? Let that awareness settle, because even as you answer in your mind, that answer will be remembered differently tomorrow. The time and place you name now will shift, rewritten by the future that is still forming. Pause here. Feel the weight of that question. Notice how easily it could have been asked of you later, and yet it feels anchored now, carried backward to this exact instant. Perhaps this too is an echo. When we think of echoes, we imagine sound. But echoes happen in meaning too. A decision you have not yet made can echo backward, coloring the way you interpret the present. A love you have not yet met may cast a shadow into your past, rearranging which memories feel important. An ending not yet written may echo into the beginning, making it seem inevitable. These echoes blur the boundary between what you remember and what you anticipate. And so your life begins to resemble not a line but a hall of mirrors. Each step you take reflects forward and backward, creating reverberations that tangle cause and effect. The memory you recall today may be different from how you will recall it tomorrow, because tomorrow's echo will have rewritten it. This is not to say you are powerless. On the contrary, your awareness of these echoes gives you a strange form of agency. If the future can whisper into the past, then you are not merely a prisoner of what has been. You are also a participant in what will be, and that participation bends backward, altering the very texture of your history. Every choice you lean toward now reshapes the meaning of moments you thought were finished. Consider again the sound of your footsteps. You walk across the floor, but the echo may have been waiting all along, ready to meet you before you arrive. Your memories may be no different. They are not static relics sealed in the past. They are chambers that resonate with the footsteps of tomorrow, reshaped every time the future shifts its weight. And so, as you sit here, listening to words that feel both familiar and new, notice the echo within yourself, the faint anticipation, the subtle sense of having already been here. Perhaps that is not memory at all. Perhaps it is tomorrow, quietly speaking back to you. Shadows of decisions. Every choice you make casts a shadow, not just forward into the consequences you can see, but backward into the way you remember your past. These shadows are subtle, but they stretch long, bending across time, dimming and reshaping the terrain you thought was already behind you. Think of the decisions you have not yet made, a career you might pursue, a relationship you may enter, a risk you could take. From the standpoint of tomorrow, each of these choices radiates backward, tinting the way you interpret your memories today. A past failure becomes either a stepping stone or a burden depending on what you eventually decide to do. The meaning of the past is never stable. It is rewritten by the shadows of future choices. Psychologists have long studied how memory changes over time, but rarely do we admit how tightly it is bound to the decisions we haven't yet taken. When you resolve to pursue a goal, the narrative of your past rearranges to support it. The failures become lessons. The obstacles become trials that gave you strength. Yet if you abandon that same goal tomorrow, the very same memories can be repainted as wasted effort, foolish detours, regrets you wish you could erase. Nothing in the past changed, only the shadow cast by the decision you finally made. This suggests something startling, that your past is not an archive but a theatre, its scenery altered by stagehands working from the future, and you are the actor caught in the performance, believing each backdrop has always been there, unaware of how the set is quietly shifted when you turn your head. Physics mirrors this theatre. In quantum experiments, particles behave as though their histories depend on what will eventually be measured. Their paths are not set until the future decides. Likewise, your personal history is not sealed until your choices unfold. Each decision retroactively determines which version of the past feels true. But what of the decisions you never make? These too cast shadows. Parallel lives imagined but not lived. Leave ghostly impressions on your memory. You think, what if I had taken that chance? And suddenly your past glows with alternate meanings. A moment of hesitation becomes the reason you are here now. A closed door becomes the silent explanation for everything else. Even unrealized choices haunt the past, leaving their shadows like silhouettes in an unfinished painting. The strangest part is how your body seems to sense these shadows before your conscious mind does. Subtle feelings, unease in a familiar place, a sudden surge of nostalgia, may not be linked to past events at all. They may be ripples of a decision still waiting ahead of you, already sending its outline back across your timeline. Just as an approaching storm casts a darkening light long before the rain begins, your future decisions may already be shading your present memories. Consider regret again. When you regret a choice, it feels like the past is damaged, scarred, made lesser. But regret is not truly about the past. It is the weight of a future in which you realize the choice could have been different. Regret is the shadow of a decision cast backward, draping over events that seemed solid until tomorrow's light revealed their fragility. This means that every memory you hold is provisional, waiting for the shadows of your next decisions to fall upon it. The conversation you had last week may seem trivial today, but if tomorrow you decide to sever a friendship, that same conversation could become the moment everything started to fracture. The memory has not changed. Its shadow has. And so you are living in a world where the past is pliable, sculpted not only by what has been but by what is still to come. Every step you take, every path you avoid, casts shadows backward that alter the map of how you believe you arrived here. The unsettling truth is this: the past you cling to may not even exist until you decide what to do next. Your memories are not the foundation of who you are. They are reflections on the wall, shifting as the shadows of your decisions move across them. So ask yourself, the choice you are hesitating to make now, the one you postpone because you fear its consequences, what shadows is it already casting backward into your past? What meaning is it already erasing or rewriting? The decision has not yet come, but its ghost may already be haunting you. The shadows of decisions are not afterthoughts. They are architects. They reshape your history, dimming some rooms, illuminating others, creating the illusion of permanence in a story that is being edited from both ends of time. And when you finally make that choice, you will believe you are moving forward. But look carefully. You may also see the past shifting behind you, rewritten in the dim outline of your shadow. Retrocausal time experiments. In the halls of physics, there are experiments that read more like riddles than science. They do not simply measure reality. They expose its contradictions, as though the universe were daring us to question our most basic assumptions. Among these puzzles are those that whisper of retrocausality, the unsettling possibility that effects can precede their causes, that the future might reach back and decide what the past was all along. One of the most famous is John Wheeler's delayed choice experiment. In its simplest form, a photon is fired toward a pair of slits, and the decision of whether it behaves like a wave or a particle is made not when it travels, but later, when it is measured. The photon's past, whether it went through both slits or just one, seems to be rewritten by a choice made after its journey. This is not science fiction. It is reproducible, repeatable, and deeply troubling to our sense of linear time. Pause and feel the strangeness. If a measurement in the future changes what we say happened in the past, then the past was never fixed. It was conditional, a draft awaiting confirmation. It suggests that reality is not written in ink, but in erasable chalk, smudged and rewritten by future events. The arrow of time begins to curl. Another layer appears in quantum entanglement. Two particles become linked, no matter how far apart they travel. Measure one, and the other responds instantly, as if distance and time were irrelevant. But when you add delayed choices into the experiment, when the decision to measure is postponed, the entanglement seems to reach backward, altering the way we describe the moment of their entanglement. What we call the past is not standing solidly behind us. It is mutable, dependent on futures that have yet to unfold. Skeptics often argue these are tricks of interpretation, illusions born of mathematical frameworks rather than actual retroactive influence. But perhaps interpretation is precisely the point. If reality is shaped by interpretation, then the moment of interpreting is also the moment of creation. Meaning does not exist until it is read, and once it is read, the past bends to accommodate the new frame. Think of memory again. Neuroscience tells us memory is not a storage unit, but a reconstruction. Every time you recall an event, you are not opening a box, but rewriting a story. If the brain is already in the business of rewriting the past from the present, why could it not also incorporate signals from the future? Retrocausal physics and retroactive memory are two mirrors reflecting each other, suggesting that the very act of observation, whether of a photon or a personal memory, collapses time into a loop rather than a line. This becomes haunting when you consider choice. Suppose tomorrow you will decide to take a path that changes your life. That choice, still ahead of you, might already be altering your memories of today. You think you chose freely, but in reality, you may be aligning with the future that has been shaping the conditions of your past all along. Retrocausality is not just a quirk of physics, it may be the secret architecture of consciousness. And what of dreams? Some researchers speculate that dreams are simulations not only of past and present, but also of potential futures. They may be trial runs, rehearsals. But if the future is not only potential but already waiting, then dreams may be the brain's way of catching faint glimpses of it, the same way a delayed choice experiment lets the future bend backward. What you dream tonight might not be a fantasy, it might be tomorrow's echo quietly rehearsing itself in your sleep. Even language itself plays a role. When you describe an event, the words you choose do not merely reflect the memory, they shape it. Tell the story differently tomorrow, and you have a different past. Words act like measurements in physics. They collapse uncertainty into a fixed version of events, but only provisionally, because the telling can always be retold. Like photons, your history waits for interpretation, and each retelling is a delayed choice, retroactively deciding what your past has always been. Retrocausal experiments do not prove that time runs backward in the way we imagine, but they dismantle the comfort of a one-way arrow. They reveal a deeper fabric where past and future co-author reality, where the ink of time is still wet long after you thought it had dried. The unsettling part is not that the future might change what is ahead of you. We expect that. The unsettling part is that the future might already be reshaping what lies behind. So you begin to wonder, the memory you hold most dearly, the one you believe defines you, is it stable, or is it still waiting, like a photon in flight, to be rewritten by choices you have not yet made? The experiments do not answer. They only echo. And in that echo, you may hear a truth stranger than science is willing to admit, that your past is not past at all. It is a manuscript still being edited by the hand of tomorrow. Anticipatory memory science. Memory is supposed to be backward-facing, a storage chest filled with the remnants of what has already happened. But what if memory is not only retrospective? What if it is anticipatory? What if the brain does not just recall the past, but quietly prepares fragments of the future, writing them in advance, and letting you mistake them for recollection once the moment arrives? Neuroscience has begun to hint at this strange possibility. In studies of anticipation, the brain shows activity patterns seconds before a stimulus appears. Even when the stimulus is unpredictable, the brain seems to prepare, as though sketching a memory ahead of time. It is not waiting passively, it is forecasting, and once the event occurs, the pre-written sketch slips neatly into place, convincing you that you experienced it linearly. But perhaps you didn't. Perhaps your brain was storing the future, as though it were already the past. This anticipatory quality shows up in daily life more often than you notice. You walk into a room and feel you've already seen it. You meet a stranger and feel you've already known them. The rational explanation points to misfiring neurons or overlapping patterns of recognition. But another interpretation is more unsettling, that the brain's predictive machinery is not merely guessing but receiving, quietly folding information from tomorrow into the fabric of memory today. Memory, after all, is not a tape recorder. It is reconstruction. Each time you recall an event, your brain is not replaying but rebuilding, weaving fragments into a new whole. That reconstruction is influenced by context, suggestion, even imagination. So why not by the future as well? If memory is flexible enough to be altered by stories told after the fact, then it may also be porous enough to absorb signals from what has not yet occurred. Some researchers argue that dreams play a role in this anticipatory process. Dreams often blend fragments of the past with strange foreshadowings of what lies ahead. You wake from a dream, and later find yourself living a scene that feels eerily familiar, as if the dream had been a rehearsal. Neuroscience calls this coincidence or pattern seeking, but in the quiet hours it feels like something deeper, the brain writing memories forward in time, leaving them to echo back when reality aligns. Even more uncanny, are experiments in psychology that explore presentiment. Participants connected to sensors show physiological responses seconds before randomly chosen images appear on a screen. The nervous system seems to anticipate the emotional impact of the future, preparing itself before the event has occurred. The brain writes the memory of fear or calm before there is anything to fear or calm down from. If this is true, then every memory you hold may be less a record of the past than a living negotiation between what has been and what will be. This bends our very definition of identity. You think of yourself as someone shaped by your history, but if anticipatory memory is real, then you are also shaped by your future. Who you become tomorrow may be the quiet author of who you believe you were yesterday. Your past is not a foundation, but a palimpsest, rewritten endlessly by the invisible hand of time stretching in both directions. Consider how you tell your own life story. Each memory you choose to emphasize reflects not only where you've been but where you are heading. If you decide tomorrow to become an artist, suddenly the childhood doodles you barely remembered will surge into importance, rewritten as foreshadowings. If you choose instead to become a lawyer, those same doodles may fade, overwritten by memories of debates and arguments. The anticipatory script of your future career reaches back and edits your archive, highlighting some fragments, discarding others, convincing you that your past always pointed here. This recursive loop makes memory feel less like a museum and more like a workshop. The exhibits are constantly rearranged, reinterpreted, relabeled, and sometimes the curator is not you in the present, but you in the future, deciding which artifacts deserve to be displayed. That future self casts shadows backward, and the brain dutifully edits, leaving you with the illusion that your memories were always as they are now. Anticipatory memory does not mean you can predict every moment ahead of you, but it does suggest that time's boundary is thinner than you think. The self you are becoming is already whispering into the self you are, leaving faint echoes in your memory that will only make sense later. Like ink that appears slowly on invisible paper, your memories may already contain words written by tomorrow's hand, waiting for you to recognize them. And so the next time you feel that shiver of familiarity, pause. The next time a moment feels pre-lived, ask yourself, is this memory from the past, or is it a draft written by the future, rehearsed in the silence of your mind? Perhaps you will never know for certain, but perhaps you don't need certainty. Perhaps it is enough to realize that memory is not a one-way recording. It is a dialogue, a quiet negotiation between echoes of yesterday and whispers of tomorrow. Prediction machinery within. Beneath the surface of your thoughts, the brain is not waiting for the world to arrive, it is already building it. Neuroscientists call this predictive processing, the idea that perception is less about receiving information and more about generating it. The brain guesses first, and only afterward corrects itself against incoming signals. In other words, what you see, hear, and feel is not reality in raw form, but the mind's best forecast, dressed up as certainty. This means that you are never fully living in the present. You are living milliseconds ahead, in a world conjured by prediction. Every step you take, every sound you register, every word you comprehend, is the brain's future-oriented machinery sketching reality before it occurs. And because those predictions feel seamless, you confuse them with memory. What you call perception may already be an anticipatory memory, a future dressed up as a past. Think of walking through a crowded street. You do not wait to see each person's movement before adjusting. Your brain forecasts their paths, predicting collisions before they happen, rehearsing tiny futures so fluidly that you experience them as present. Without this machinery, survival would be impossible. But in providing safety, it also exposes a deeper truth. Much of what you believe is happening now is already a constructed tomorrow. Experiments confirm this eerie fact. Visual processing lags behind reality by tens of milliseconds. The brain compensates by predicting what you are about to see, creating the illusion of a continuous flow. Without this constant guessing, the world would appear fractured and delayed. You would never catch a ball, never dodge a car, never finish a conversation. But because you live in prediction, you rarely notice the gap. The present you think you inhabit is stitched together from fragments of what hasn't yet occurred. This predictive machinery extends to memory itself. The hippocampus, long associated with remembering the past, also lights up when imagining the future. Its role is not simply archival, it is generative, weaving possible scenarios. Every time you remember, you are also rehearsing. Every time you imagine tomorrow, you are also rewriting yesterday. The brain does not separate the two as cleanly as you'd like to believe. And so identity becomes a paradox. You tell yourself that you are the sum of your memories. But if memory is indistinguishable from prediction, then you are equally the sum of your futures. Who you think you are is a collaboration between what has happened and what is expected. The machinery within you writes in both directions, leaving you to inhabit a story where the past is forever being edited to align with the anticipated script ahead. This blurring becomes visible in moments of déjà vu. A situation feels eerily familiar, not because it replicates the past, but because the brain briefly mistakes a prediction for a memory. You forecast the scene, then enter it, and the overlap convinces you you've lived it before. Déjà vu is not a glitch, but a window into the machinery, revealing how easily the future is dressed up as the past. Consider how this machinery shapes even your emotions. Anticipatory anxiety, for instance, is not fear of what has happened, but fear of what might happen, experienced so vividly that it colors your memory of the present. Later, when you recall the event, it is inseparable from the future your brain rehearsed. Likewise, anticipation of joy can reshape a dull moment into a glowing one, as though the promise of happiness had already seeped into the archive of your past. What does this mean for the story of your life? It means you are not simply walking a line from birth to death, recording experiences along the way. You are carrying an internal machinery that projects ahead, pulling the light of the future backward, layering it over what you think has already been. You are, in a sense, haunted not by your past, but by the countless futures your brain is rehearsing inside you, moment by moment. And if that is true, then the present is not a point in time. It is a negotiation between predictions and corrections, between futures rehearsed and realities confirmed. You never live now. You live always slightly ahead, your brain smoothing the difference, convincing you that the story is stable, but stability is illusion. Beneath it, the machinery is humming, revising, rewriting, ensuring that tomorrow's script quietly infiltrates yesterday's memory. So the next time you feel certain of what you have seen or recall what you have lived, pause, ask yourself, how much of this was memory, and how much was the prediction machinery within? Could it be that what you think you know has been written, not by where you have been, but by where you are about to go? Dreams from tomorrow. Every night you slip into a theater where the rules of time bend and blur. Dreams unfold without logic, yet carry a strange familiarity, as though you are not inventing them but remembering them. What if this is not imagination at all? What if your dreams are not fragments of the past replayed in distorted form, but whispers from the future, bleeding backward into your sleep? Neuroscience has long insisted that dreams serve to consolidate memory, the brain replaying, reorganizing, and integrating the day's experiences. Yet, if memory is already anticipatory as we've seen, then dreams may also be anticipatory. They are not only storage but rehearsal, not only reflection but foreshadowing. Some dreams arrive with uncanny precision, resembling moments you will live later, moments that feel less like coincidence and more like echoes of tomorrow drifting into your night. Consider the phenomenon of déjà rêvé, déjà vu's stranger sibling. It is the eerie sensation not just of having lived a moment before, but of having dreamed it. You walk into a place, or meet a face, and recall that it had already appeared in your dreams. The future moments seem to have been written ahead of time in the language of sleep, waiting quietly until it was lived. Psychology labels this coincidence, a trick of the mind. But what if it is evidence that the boundary between dreaming and destiny is more porous than we allow? Even the structure of dreaming suggests rehearsal. Rapid eye movement. Sleep is not passive. The brain is ablaze with activity, creating simulations that feel indistinguishable from waking life. Muscles are paralyzed to keep you safe while the mind runs through scenarios that often exceed the raw material of the past. Where do these futures come from? If they are only inventions, why do they so often echo real events that unfold later? Perhaps because dreams are not inventions at all, but windows into futures already etched in the architecture of time. Think of how a story's ending reshapes its beginning. In dreams, this logic is reversed. The end may already be written, and the dream is simply the beginning rearranged to prepare you for it. You dream of losing someone, and weeks later grief arrives. You dream of traveling, and later you find yourself stepping into the place your mind conjured. Even when the details differ, the feeling is the same, a sense that the dream knew. Science does not dismiss this entirely. The brain's predictive coding system continues even in sleep, forecasting not only waking life but potential futures. The hippocampus, the same structure that archives memory, is active in REM sleep, rehearsing imagined possibilities. But again, if memory is influenced by the future, then these rehearsals may not be guesses. They may be alignments with echoes of what is already on its way, fragments leaking back into the night, disguised as fiction. And if dreams are shaped by tomorrow, then so too are the identities you wake into. The dreams you remember color your perception of the past. A nightmare makes yesterday's worries feel darker. A blissful dream paints history in warmer hues. This means that the future, in the form of a dream not yet fulfilled, alters the way you remember your past. Even while you sleep, your timeline is being rearranged. There is also the matter of recurring dreams. These are not simple reruns of memory, but persistent rehearsals, as if your mind is preparing you for something that has not yet arrived. A repeated dream may be less about the past refusing to fade than the future refusing to stay hidden. Each return of the dream is another echo, another reminder of what waits ahead. Culturally, humans have always sensed this. Ancient traditions regarded dreams as messages from gods or ancestors, not because they misunderstood psychology, but because they recognized what modern science often avoids, that dreams bend time. They saw the future embedded in dreams not metaphorically, but literally, because the line between what is coming and what has been is less clear when the mind drifts into its deepest states. So perhaps you should not treat dreams as illusions, but as whispers, faint messages from the timeline ahead. Perhaps they are the raw drafts of memories not yet lived, being written quietly in the silence of your sleep. And when you wake, ask yourself, was that dream merely fantasy, or was it tomorrow's echo disguised in symbols? Could it be that your mind, untethered from waking time, has already wandered into the days ahead, returned with fragments, and stored them in the archives you believe belong to the past? If so, then every dream you dream is not only memory in disguise, but prophecy hiding in plain sight. Time-Symmetric Physics. If you were to peel back the surface of time, the comforting story of past flowing into future begins to collapse. Physics does not favor our human narrative of the arrow of time. In fact, the deepest equations we know, those that govern particles, fields, and the dance of the cosmos, are time-symmetric. They do not care which direction time runs. Past and future are treated as equals. What you call before and after is not written into the mathematics of the universe, but into the way you, a human mind, interpret its flow. This symmetry unsettles everything you believe about cause and effect. We assume events happen in sequence. A stone is dropped, it falls, it lands, yet the equations would work just as well if the stone were seen rising into your hand, the past rewriting itself from the ground upward. The rules are reversible. The only reason you experience time in one direction is entropy, the tendency of order to dissolve into disorder. But entropy itself does not dictate causality. It only sets the stage for the story you prefer to tell. This means that the future is not as excluded from shaping reality as you think. If the laws of physics are indifferent to direction, then there is no fundamental barrier to the future affecting the past. Time-symmetric equations allow for retrocausality, for information to travel backward, for tomorrow to whisper into yesterday. It is only the conventions of human perception that insist the world flows one way. Imagine watching a film reel. The scenes appear linear because the projector runs forward. But if you reversed the reel, the story would still be coherent, still subject to the same laws of physics. Time-symmetric physics suggests that the universe itself is more like the reel than the projection, neutral, reversible, containing the whole film at once. The sense of flow is an illusion created by your mind as it moves through the frames. And if the universe holds the entire reel at once, then your future already exists within it. Not just potentially, but actually, waiting to be experienced. Your past is not a closed archive. It is an active section of the same reel, capable of being reinterpreted by the scenes that follow. You walk through the movie convinced the plot is unfolding, when in truth, the ending has always been there, quietly shaping the meaning of the beginning. This is why endings change everything. A novel read to completion reshapes how you recall its first chapters. A conversation concluded with betrayal makes every earlier word seem poisoned. A life event transforms the way you remember childhood. The symmetry of time ensures that later frames recontextualize earlier ones, just as surely as earlier frames build toward the end. Physics tells us this is not metaphor but structure. The universe itself does not privilege before, over, after. You may wonder, if time is symmetric, why can't you remember the future as easily as you recall the past? One answer lies in entropy. Memory is tied to the increase of disorder, to the way information leaves traces as systems evolve. The future leaves no physical traces yet, but symmetry suggests that it could still send subtle ripples backward. influencing how those traces are assembled. What you call memory may already be part echo of the past, part whisper from the future. The strange thing is, how familiar this already feels. When you anticipate something strongly, a meeting, a decision, a confrontation, the anticipation reshapes how you remember the hours leading to it. The symmetry is already visible in your psychology. The future alters the meaning of the past. You do not wait for tomorrow to arrive. Tomorrow has already left fingerprints on today. And so the arrow of time becomes less like a line, and more like a thread woven through a tapestry. From within, you see one direction. From above, you see the whole design. Past and future entwined, neither privileged, both essential. Your life is not unfolding forward. It is unfolding all at once, and you are merely traveling through it in a particular direction, unaware that the other direction holds equal claim. Time-symmetric physics does not strip you of meaning. It does the opposite. It reveals that every moment is more alive than you thought. Each second is influenced, not only by what has been, but by what is still to come. Every memory may carry a faint resonance of the future. Every decision may be a collaboration between your present will and your future self. Perhaps this is why some moments feel inevitable. They are not accidents of chance, but intersections in the tapestry where threads converge. When you reach them, you feel the gravity of inevitability, as though you were always meant to be there. And maybe you were, not because the past dictated it, but because the future had been pulling you toward it all along. Time symmetry means the universe is not a story being written in sequence. It is a story already written, waiting for you to read it, in whatever order you are able. Probability bending backwards. We are taught to think of probability as a forward-moving game. Dice rolled, cards drawn, events unfolding with chances that ripple ahead. But what if probability does not only lean forward into the unknown? What if it also bends backward, quietly reshaping the way you understand what has already happened? At first this sounds impossible. The past is fixed. Probability belongs to the future. But consider how often probability already rewrites the past in your own experience. You flip a coin, as it spins, the outcome feels suspended. Yet the moment it lands, your memory of the flip rearranges. You tell yourself you always knew it would be heads, or you had a feeling it would be tails. A probability that once belonged to the future rewrote the story you attached to the past. Psychology calls this hindsight bias, the illusion that you knew it all along. But perhaps it is more than illusion. Perhaps probability itself casts shadows backward, creating the sense that the path you took was inevitable. You believe the past was always leading here, when in truth it was only one of many possible routes. The moment one probability becomes reality, it reaches backward and edits the way you remember your journey. Physics entertains something similar in the concept of retrocausality. In certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, probabilities don't collapse only forward in time. They can also collapse backward, altering how we describe what the past must have been. A particle's path isn't determined until the measurement, and once measured, the probabilities not only dictate the future, but retroactively define the history. What you thought was random behind you becomes scripted by an outcome that lay ahead. This backward bending is not confined to subatomic worlds. It shapes your life in ways both subtle and grand. Imagine two people meeting by chance. Before they cross paths, the probability of meeting is scattered across infinite possibilities. After they meet, their pasts suddenly seem aligned. The missed trains, the delayed coffee, the coincidence of place. Probability, once fluid, crystallizes backward, rewriting their personal histories as though the meeting were always meant to be. You have lived this too. A decision that seemed trivial in the moment, later becomes monumental. Looking back, you tell yourself that moment was destined, inevitable. But what if it was only probability bending backward, coloring the past with significance it never carried at the time? The outcome didn't just shape your future, it retroactively sculpted your memory of the past. Even in science, probabilities cast their backward influence. When a doctor makes a diagnosis, probabilities of illness hover. Once a definitive answer is reached, the medical history of symptoms seems to make sense, reorganized in light of the outcome. It feels as though the past symptoms were pointing all along, but really the outcome reshaped the narrative. The probability bent backward, writing coherence into the archive of memory. This suggests something profound about identity. You are not only the sum of events that happened, but the sum of probabilities that bent backward to arrange those events into meaning. Who you think you are today is not simply the product of what occurred yesterday. It is the result of countless futures collapsing into place. sending their ripples back to rewrite how yesterday feels in memory. Probability also alters the texture of regret. When you dwell on what could have been, you are not simply longing for a lost future. You are feeling the pull of probabilities that were once alive, but collapsed elsewhere. Their echoes haunt your memory, bending it to highlight missed opportunities, paths you never walked. Regret is the ache of unrealized probabilities bending backward, coloring the past in absence rather than fulfillment. But there is a strange comfort hidden here. If probability bends backward, then your past is never as rigid as you fear. It is flexible, its meaning continually rewritten as probabilities collapse into outcomes. This means your history is not a prison. It is a living script, edited again and again by the probabilities that lie ahead. Consider again the dice. Before they land, the future feels uncertain. After they land, the story of the throw seems inevitable. But in that inevitability lies the illusion. Probability reached backward, convincing you the past was always destined. The truth is subtler, stranger. The past is not fixed until the future arrives. And so your life becomes a sequence of probabilities bending both directions, shaping not only what you anticipate, but what you believe you remember. Every roll of the dice, every decision, every coincidence is a ripple in both time directions, sculpting your sense of who you were even as it defines who you will become. The past you cling to, then, may be nothing more than probability written backward, and the future you await may already be bending quietly, preparing to rearrange the story of how you got here. Quantum delays unveiled. There are moments in physics when the universe seems to pause, holding its breath, waiting for us to decide what has already happened. These are the experiments of quantum delay, where cause and effect blur until the future appears to rewrite the past. The unsettling part is not that this happens in a laboratory, it is that the logic seems to echo into your own life, into the way memory, choice and identity unfold. The delayed choice experiments are the most haunting examples. A photon is fired toward a beam splitter. If we measure it one way, it behaves like a particle, choosing a definite path. If we measure it another way, it behaves like a wave, exploring both paths at once. But here is the twist. The choice of measurement can be delayed until after the photon has already traveled, and yet, the results suggest the photon's past behavior depended on the future choice. It is as if tomorrow reached back and quietly rewrote yesterday's script. Think about what this means. If the universe allows outcomes to reach backward, then the story of reality is not fully written in the moment you live it. It is provisional, waiting for decisions that may not exist yet. The past you trust so deeply could be no more stable than the flicker of a quantum particle, rewritten when the future finally arrives. You may wonder if this is just an abstract puzzle of physics, far removed from your daily life. But notice how your mind works in strikingly similar ways. A memory feels one way today, and then you learn something tomorrow that changes it completely. A conversation you thought was casual becomes ominous. Once the betrayal surfaces later, an encounter you dismissed becomes luminous after love grows from it. The memory did not change at the time. It changed when the future bent backward to reframe it. Quantum delays and human memories obey the same strange logic. The meaning of the past is not decided until later. This logic plays out in stories too. A film's ending can completely transform how you remember its opening. A novel's final twist reshapes every earlier scene. The story has not changed, but your interpretation has been delayed until the future provided context. Life may function the same way. The ending waiting for you tomorrow could already be reshaping how you recall today, even if you do not yet realize it. In neuroscience, similar delays are found in decision-making. Brain activity predicts choices seconds before conscious awareness catches up. Your sense of choosing feels immediate, but in reality, it lags behind processes already in motion. Consciousness is the delayed measurement. By the time you think you've chosen, the brain has already set the path. This too suggests the past is not experienced directly, but retroactively edited once the measurement of awareness occurs. The implications are profound. If both physics and psychology point to this same recursive structure, then reality itself may be fundamentally delayed. What you call the present is always a reconstruction, built from signals that have already passed but are not yet fixed in meaning. Your life is not an unfolding stream but a constant rewriting, where tomorrow's decisions decide what yesterday was all along. This does not strip your life of meaning, it multiplies it. Every moment is more alive because it is unfinished, still waiting for the edits that will come from futures you cannot yet see. Every memory you hold is provisional, still open to being rewritten by the delays of time. What feels final may not be final at all. Even your sense of identity is part of this delay. You believe you are who you are because of what you have lived. But if the meaning of your past is rewritten by your future, then you are not the product of yesterday alone. You are the collaboration of yesterday's fragments and tomorrow's choices, braided together in delays that prevent the story from ever being complete. So the next time you look back on your life, pause before declaring what it all meant. The meaning may not exist yet. The past you are clinging to may still be waiting for the future to finish writing it. Just as a photon's behavior is not decided until the delayed measurement is made, your life's story is not decided until the future decides it. And when that decision comes, it will feel as though it had always been true. The past will bend backward to make room, and you will believe it was always this way. But deep down, you may sense the delay, the gap, the echo of tomorrow reaching into yesterday. Perhaps you are already living in a universe of quantum delays, where the present is never final, and the past is still being unveiled by the future. Knowing before knowing. There are moments when you act before you realize why. You reach for the phone a second before it rings. You answer a question before your conscious mind has caught up. You feel an instinctive certainty that something is about to happen, and when it does, you tell yourself it must have been coincidence. But what if it was not coincidence? What if you knew before you knew? Neuroscience has found evidence for this eerie phenomenon. In experiments measuring brain activity, researchers have discovered signals firing seconds before participants report making a conscious decision. The brain decides first, consciousness arrives later. The sense of free will that you are the origin of choice may be a retroactive illusion. You act, and then your mind creates the story that you decided. In this way, awareness is not the cause of action, but its delayed narrator. You already knew before you knew. But the puzzle deepens. Studies of anticipatory physiology suggest the body may respond to future events before they occur. Subtle changes in heart rate, shifts in skin conductance, pupil dilation, all emerge seconds before a stimulus is revealed. Even when the stimulus is random and unpredictable, the body seems to know what is coming. If that is true, then knowledge is not a forward-facing process. It is a two-way exchange, with the future sending faint signals into the present. You have felt this in the strange comfort of intuition. You walk into a room and sense tension before a word is spoken. You feel dread before receiving bad news. You recognize the right choice without being able to explain why. Science often explains intuition as subconscious pattern recognition, the brain piecing together clues you do not notice. But perhaps this is only half the truth. Perhaps intuition is the awareness of the future reaching into you, letting you know before you know. Memory itself is shaped by this retroactive knowing. A moment of certainty today can alter how you recall yesterday. You interpret your past decisions as though you had always sensed what was coming. The brain's storytelling rewrites memory, so that the knowledge feels inevitable, as though you knew it all along. In reality, the knowing arrived later, and then reached backward, stitching itself into the fabric of your history. This recursive process is everywhere. Consider a conversation where someone reveals a hidden truth. Instantly, earlier words in the dialogue take on new meaning. You believe you had suspected it all along, but in truth, the knowledge came later and was retroactively applied. You knew before you knew, not in the moment, but in the rewriting of memory by the future. Even language reflects this paradox. Phrases like "I had a feeling" or "something told me" suggest an unnamed source of knowledge. That source may be nothing more than the temporal loop itself, the mind catching whispers from outcomes not yet arrived, and then folding them back into the story of who you are. What does this say about identity? It suggests that the person you think you are is constructed not only from past experiences, but also from anticipatory knowledge. Your future self, already moving through decisions and consequences, may be leaking fragments into your present, guiding you toward alignment. Who you are is not fixed by where you have been, but is also quietly sculpted by where you will go. And so, the eerie sensation of déjà vu, or sudden clarity, may not be errors in perception. They may be glimpses of this recursive system, where knowing arrives out of sequence, bending backward into your sense of time. You feel unsettled because the mind craves order. But perhaps the disorder is the truth. Knowledge does not belong to one direction of time. This changes how you think about choice. If you sometimes know before you know, then decisions are not entirely free. They are guided by signals from ahead, influences that leak into your awareness before your conscious story forms. You are not inventing your path step by step. You are listening to echoes of a path already laid out, aligning yourself with knowledge that belongs to the future as much as the past. So pause for a moment. Think of the certainty you feel about something that has not yet occurred. Think of the instinct you cannot explain. Ask yourself, is this knowledge truly yours, or is it a whisper from a tomorrow already written, a fragment of a script leaking back into today? Perhaps you have always known before you knew. Perhaps all of us have. Déjà vu glimpses. You walk into a room, hear a phrase, see a flicker of light across a stranger's face, and suddenly, it all feels uncannily familiar. Déjà vu, the sensation of having lived this moment before. It lasts only seconds, fragile as smoke, but its effect lingers. You cannot shake the eerie conviction that the present is also the past. But what if it is not the past you are recognizing at all? What if déjà vu is not memory, but a glimpse of the future breaking through? Traditional explanations frame it as a neural glitch, the brain misfiring, mistaking the present for a memory. But that explanation fails to capture the strangeness. Déjà vu does not feel like confusion. It feels like recognition. It carries a weight, an authority, as though the moment truly has already happened. If it is illusion, why does it feel like certainty? Consider déjà rêve, when the familiarity seems to come not from the past but from a dream. You stand in a place and realize you dreamed this scene days or weeks before. At the time, the dream felt trivial, nonsensical, but in the moment of déjà rêve, it feels prophetic. The future was already rehearsed, and the present is simply catching up. If this is so, then déjà rêve may be less about the recycling of memory and more about alignment with futures your mind has already brushed against. Neuroscience hints at this possibility through predictive coding, the idea that the brain constantly forecasts what will happen next. Sometimes those forecasts are so vivid, so precise, that when reality arrives, it feels as though you've lived it before. But what if those forecasts are not just guesses? What if they are echoes from the future itself, carried backward through the machinery of time-symmetric laws? Déjà vu would then be the conscious mind stumbling onto information it was never supposed to have, a brief glitch where tomorrow leaks into today. Think of how déjà vu feels in your body. A shiver, a pause, a slight quickening of breath. Your nervous system reacts as if recognizing something familiar, but what it recognizes may not be memory. It may be anticipatory resonance, your body acknowledging a future moment it has already rehearsed. The familiarity is not from the past, but from alignment with what is still to come. This reframes déjà vu as a form of knowledge, not knowledge of where you have been, but of where you are going. A glimpse, fleeting and incomplete, into the loop of time. For a heartbeat, you sense that the future is already here, quietly editing your perception of the present. The discomfort comes not from error, but from truth, that you are not moving forward through time, but circling within it, colliding briefly with fragments of what awaits. Cultural traditions have long suspected this. Ancient thinkers treated déjà vu as omens, signs that destiny had already been written. Mystics saw it as evidence of the eternal return, that all moments repeat endlessly, and your recognition is proof that the cycle has spun before. Modern science avoids such conclusions, but cannot explain why déjà vu feels so much like recognition, not confusion. Perhaps both mystics and scientists are touching the same paradox from different sides. Déjà vu as the brain's acknowledgement that the future and past are not as separate as we believe. Even in personal narratives, déjà vu alters the texture of identity. A fleeting moment of recognition convinces you that life is not random, that you are moving through a pattern larger than yourself. You cannot prove it, but the sensation stays a reminder that time might be a woven fabric rather than a line, that your future is already there, and in rare instance, you can feel its threads brushing against you. Think of how déjà vu changes memory afterward. You may forget the details, but the sense of recognition lingers, a ghost of inevitability. It is as though the moment was retroactively marked, not by where you have been, but by where you were going. Déjà vu does not simply happen and vanish. It alters how you recall the moment forever, making it feel weighted, significant, a hinge in your personal timeline. Perhaps this is its true role, not as a glitch, but as a reminder, a brief window where you glimpse the architecture of time, where you realize that your future may already be echoing backward into your present, and though you cannot hold on to it, the glimpse is enough. It unsettles you, but it also awakens you. So the next time déjà vu grips you, resist the urge to dismiss it. Instead, pause. Notice how the world feels doubled, how recognition comes before explanation. Ask yourself, what if this is not memory at all? What if this is tomorrow's shadow, falling across today? Perhaps that is what déjà vu truly is. Not the repetition of the past, but the recognition of the future, briefly unveiled. Language rewrites memory. You believe memory lives in images, sounds, sensations, but in truth, much of it lives in words. Language does not merely describe memory, it rewrites it. Every time you tell a story about your past, the words you choose change the way you remember, and the next time you recall it, you are not pulling out the original event. You are pulling out the last version you told, already shaped by language, already altered by the act of naming. Psychologists call this the reconstructive nature of memory. Experiments show that when people are asked to describe an event, the very language they use alters what they later recall. Change a single word in the description, crash instead of bump, smashed instead of hit, and witnesses remember different speeds, different details, even fragments that never happened. Language does not record memory, it edits it. But the deeper truth is even more unsettling. If memory can be altered by language, then the future can also shape the past through words. Tomorrow you may tell a story differently, and in that telling, you will alter not only how others see your past, but how you see it yourself. Your future act of speaking will reach backward, reshaping yesterday into a different narrative. Think of a moment of heartbreak. At first, you tell the story with words of betrayal, anger, and loss. Years later, you retell it with words of growth, strength, and resilience. The event did not change. The memory did. The words chosen in the future rewrote the meaning of the past. This recursive rewriting happens constantly. A child describes a fearful moment in simple words. An adult recalls the same moment with a richer vocabulary, transforming it into something entirely different. Language does not simply label experience, it reshapes it. And because language evolves with you, your past is never stable. It shifts, retroactively rewritten as your words change. Even silence has its role. What you never put into words fades faster, erodes, loses coherence. It is as though memory requires the scaffolding of language to survive. The stories you choose to tell remain vivid. The ones you never voice dissolve into shadows. In this way, your future choices about what to say and what to leave unsaid determine which pieces of your past survive. Philosophers have long suspected this. They noted that words are not neutral containers of truth, but tools of construction. To speak of a memory is to build it anew, to retell a story is to redraw its map. And the future you, armed with new metaphors, new insights, new language, will inevitably redraw it differently. Even culture plays a part. The language available to you dictates what memories you can construct. Some languages contain words for emotions, others cannot name. To remember an emotion, you must name it. Without the word, the memory may never crystallize. If you learn the word years later, suddenly you can reinterpret the past, recalling emotions you did not know how to describe before. In that moment, the future's language rewrites your history. This means your past is not a fixed archive, but a living manuscript, edited every time you speak of it. The same event can become tragedy or triumph, depending on the vocabulary your future self chooses. The words have always been powerful, but what makes them haunting is their direction. Language flows backward, altering memories long after they have been lived. Consider also the private dialogue in your mind, the way you label yourself. Success, failure, victim, survivor. These words reshape how you recall your life. Change the label tomorrow, and yesterday transforms with it. The past bends to the lexicon of the present, guided by the grammar of the future. And so, the story of who you are is never final. Each time you speak of it, you revise it. Each time you put memory into words, you create a new past. This is why you can never fully trust your own recollections. They are not just colored by time, but rewritten by the language you will use tomorrow. Language is not only the tool of memory, it is the architect of time. It reaches backward as much as forward, building bridges across years, reshaping landscapes already walked. Every story you tell today will become the scaffolding of your past tomorrow, and the act of telling will make it feel inevitable, as though it had always been true. But deep down, you may sense the paradox. The memory you cling to is not original. It is a revision, a draft marked up by words chosen long after the event, and the draft is never final. It is always waiting for the future to pick up the pen and begin rewriting again. So ask yourself, what words will you choose next? They will not only describe who you are, they will decide who you were. End shapes beginning. You think of beginnings as pure, untouched, unshaped by what comes after. The first page of a book, the first step into a room, the first words exchanged with someone new, all of these feel like openings, foundations on which the future is built. But what if beginnings are not foundations at all? What if beginnings are sculpted, retroactively, by endings that have not yet arrived? Stories reveal this truth most clearly. A novel's first chapter reads one way when you open the book, and another way once you know the ending. The quiet detail that once seemed trivial becomes foreshadowing. The casual remark transforms into prophecy. The ending has reached backward and rewritten the beginning. You can never go back and read it the same way again. The words did not change, but the meaning did. Your life may be no different. The endings that await you in relationships, careers, identities, are already shaping how you recall your beginnings. A friendship that ends in betrayal casts a shadow over the first meeting, turning smiles into warnings you somehow should have seen. A love that grows into lasting commitment makes that first conversation glow with destiny, as if it were always meant to be. The ending alters the way the beginning is stored, reshaping its meaning. Even on smaller scales, the pattern holds. The end of a conversation can transform how you recall its start. A simple goodbye tinged with anger can retroactively sour what came before. A final compliment can brighten earlier words. In this way, every ending edits the beginning, convincing you that it always carried this meaning. Neuroscience supports this illusion. Memory is not a static recording but a reconstruction, reshaped each time you recall it. When you revisit a beginning, you are filtering it through knowledge of the ending. The beginning becomes a draft rewritten by future context. This is why first impressions are not final. They are continually overwritten as endings unfold. Consider the phenomenon of hindsight bias. Once you know the outcome of an event, you reinterpret its beginning as though it had been obvious. I should have known, you say, as though the signs were always there, but they were not there until the ending arrived to cast its light backward. The mind cannot help but rewrite the beginning to align with the ending. This does not mean beginnings are meaningless. It means they are unfinished. They are not fully written until the ending arrives. A birth is not only the start of a life, it is a beginning whose meaning will only be known at the end. An idea is not only its spark, it is a seed whose significance is revealed only once it flowers or withers. The beginning is always waiting for the ending to tell it what it was. Even physics whispers this truth. Time-symmetric laws suggest that later states can influence earlier ones, that outcomes can ripple backward. Just as a photon's path can be determined by a future measurement, your beginnings may be shaped by futures not yet lived. The start of your story is provisional, its meaning incomplete, until the final frame is revealed. This paradox is unsettling, but it also carries a strange beauty. It means your past is not locked. It means that even now the meaning of your beginnings is still shifting. Tomorrow's ending may cast them in new light, transforming regret into growth or triumph into folly. The story is not finished, and therefore neither are its origins. Think of your own beginnings. The first day at a job, the first time you met someone important, the first step into a home. Do you remember them as they were or as they have been rewritten by what came after? You cannot separate the two. The ending has already decided the shape of the beginning, even as you cling to the illusion that the beginning was pure. Perhaps this is why nostalgia is so bittersweet. When you look back, you are not seeing the beginning itself. You are seeing the ending's shadow laid across it. Every early joy carries the weight of how it ended. Every loss rewrites the moment it began. Nostalgia is not a return to the past. It is a recognition of how the past has been sculpted by futures that came later. So the next time you think of a beginning, the first page of a book, the first word of a story, the first step into a new life, pause. Recognize that you are not experiencing it as it was. You are experiencing it as it has been rewritten by what followed. The end has already reached back. The beginning you believe you remember may never have existed in the way you think. Perhaps this is the true paradox, that nothing ever begins cleanly. Every beginning is already haunted by its ending. Narratives from ahead. You live inside stories the way a fish lives inside water. Most days you forget the medium exists. Yet every thought, every memory, every decision is buoyed by narrative, a plot line that gives events direction and meaning. The secret few ever name is that many of these narratives do not rise from the past. They arrive from ahead. They are outlines written by futures that have not yet unfolded, quietly instructing your present on how to interpret what has already occurred. Consider how a single sentence can reorganize a life. I am becoming someone who, the moment you whisper it, your archive rearranges. Scenes you once shrugged off step forward as foreshadowing. Others fade to the background like deleted subplots. That forward-facing sentence acts like gravity, curving the arc of memory toward its promised endpoint. You think you chose a narrative because of the past. In truth, the narrative chose the past it needed, and it did so from the vantage point of the future it intends to reach. Cultures do this at scale. Myths, genres, and archetypes are templates waiting in front of us. The hero's journey is not only a story we tell about what happened, it is a story that dictates how we experience what is happening and how we will later remember what happened. Give a life the outline of quest, and ordinary stumbles become trials. Helpers appear as mentors, detours become the necessary dark forest. The outline was always a map drawn ahead of the traveler, and the footsteps learn to fit it. This is not manipulation alone. It is survival. The brain's predictive machinery requires models, and models are narratives with verbs. A model that expects betrayal will sift the past to confirm its suspicions. A model that expects redemption will audition the same events for signs of grace. Both stories can be told from the same facts because the facts are not the story, the narrative is, and the narrative that wins is often the one with the strongest pull from the future, the one that offers the clearest promise of where this is going. Think of prophecy in its mundane form. The self-fulfilling expectation. You tell yourself a conversation will fail, and your voice tightens, your patience thins, micro-expressions advertise retreat. The outcome complies. Later you say, "See, I knew it." But what you knew was not the past speaking. It was the future's script recruiting the present to play its part. Narratives from ahead are not just forecasts. They are invitations to align. Memory obeys these invitations faithfully. Each retrieval is an edit, and edits bend toward coherence with the active storyline. When your forward narrative changes, memories are recast. The skeptic becomes the early supporter. The early supporter becomes the hidden obstacle. The throwaway coincidence becomes the hinge. This is why conflicting versions of the same event can both feel true. Different futures are tugging your archive toward different arrangements. Even grief follows narrative gravity. Loss awaits a story to settle inside. Tragedy, initiation, injustice, renewal. The selection rarely comes from the event itself. It comes from the horizon. If you sense renewal, the past fills with seeds. If you sense tragedy, the past fills with omens. The sorrow is constant, but its meaning is edited by the narrative that steps forward from ahead and says, "This is what we were always becoming." Language is the tool, but teleology is the hand that holds it. The sense of purpose flowing backward. You do not merely ask, "What happened?" You ask, "What were we heading toward?" Purpose is a magnet placed in the future that organizes iron filings of memory into a pattern that looks inevitable. Remove the magnet, and the filings relax into noise. Place a different magnet, and a different coherence appears. There are days when you glimpse this mechanism. You watch yourself revising a private origin story to fit an emerging destination. You feel the page warm beneath words you have not written, as though the ending had already pressed its outline into the paper. In those moments, the honesty is uncomfortable. You are not discovering meaning, you are installing it from ahead. Yet the discomfort is also freedom. If a narrative can be chosen by a future, then a different future can choose a different narrative. The past is less a prison, more a room with doors you had not seen. This does not absolve responsibility, it intensifies it. The narratives you adopt are instruments that tune your attention, and attention lays the tracks memory will ride. Choose a storyline of suspicion, and your gaze harvests evidence of betrayal. Choose a storyline of stewardship, and your gaze notices small chances to repair. The future you endorse becomes the editor of your past. Even silence belongs to the plot. What you refuse to narrate calcifies at the edges of recall, not because it was unimportant, but because no future asked it to speak. Later, a new destination arrives. Parenthood, vocation, faith, revolt, and the quiet scenes thaw, revealing themselves as missing chapters that finally make sense. They were not hidden. They were waiting for a story big enough to hold them. The story came from ahead. Physics lends a metaphor, if not a proof. In time-symmetric formulations, boundary conditions at the end of a process can constrain what was permissible at the start. In human terms, The boundary condition is your chosen telos, the for the sake of which, decide that your life is for repair, and your history reconfigures as apprenticeship to mending, decide it is for conquest, and the same episodes harden into training for dominance. The equations do not change, the constraints do, meaning flows backward. So what should you do with a past that keeps being rewritten by futures not yet lived? You could cling to yesterday's draft and suffer each revision as betrayal, or you could treat narrative as a craft, a careful hospitality to purposes worthy enough to deserve your memory. Ask not only what is the truest story, but what future does this story serve, and is that future worth letting into my past? There will be moments when the plot you chose fails you. The magnet releases, the filings scatter. In the quiet that follows, resist the panic to grab the nearest ready-made genre. Wait until you can sense a narrative that does not merely flatter your fear or your pride, but enlarges your capacity to keep promises. Then let that narrative from ahead extend its hand. It will not erase what happened. It will arrange it, restoring the fragments to a coherence that calls you higher. In that arrangement you may feel something like grace, not the denial of the past, but its reauthorship by a future luminous enough to deserve it. And you will recognize the paradox at the heart of a life well told, that who you were has always depended on who you are still becoming. Future self-pulling. You often imagine the self as something built from behind, the sum of your memories, your choices, your scars. You are the result of where you have been. But what if this is only half the truth? What if the self you are becoming is just as powerful, reaching backward, pulling you toward it, shaping the very path you think you chose? Think of how you sometimes feel a strange tug, as though a version of you that does not exist yet is already guiding your steps. You hesitate at one option and lean toward another, not because of what has been, but because of what you sense lies ahead. This is more than intuition. It is the gravitational pull of a future self, drawing you toward alignment, making the present rearrange itself in preparation for the person you will become. Psychologists glimpse this paradox in the way people describe themselves. When asked about identity, many speak not only of their past, but of their imagined future. I am someone who will. These statements shape behavior today, influencing which memories rise to the surface and which are forgotten. In other words, the narrative of your future self edits your history, turning random events into foreshadowing. You remember differently because of who you expect to become. Consider goals. The decision to pursue one is not simply about the future. It is a restructuring of the past. The athlete training for victory sees childhood struggles as preparation. The artist who commits to a vision recalls early doodles as destiny. The student pursuing medicine reinterprets old curiosities as signs that the path was inevitable. Their past did not create the goal created their past. Even neuroscience hints at this pull. The brain's default mode network, active during daydreaming and self-reflection, often simulates not the past but possible futures. It rehearses, projects, imagines. These simulations are not idle. They shape how you act now, how you remember yesterday, how you edit your life story. The self is not a monument built from behind, but a horizon pulling you forward. Think of déjà vu again, or moments of eerie inevitability, when you feel you were always meant to be exactly where you are. That sensation may not be the past funneling you here, but the future self pulling you into place, reaching back through the fabric of time to claim you. The comfort of inevitability is not that the past explains the present, but that the future has already embraced it. Even regret can be reframed this way. Regret is the tug of a future self disappointed with the path chosen. The ache is not only backward-facing, it is forward-facing, reminding you that the self you might have been is still exerting a pull. You feel torn because you are not only dragged by memory, but also stretched by destiny. Philosophers have long debated free will, but perhaps the paradox is resolved by this tug-of-war. You are not entirely free in the present, because you are influenced from both directions. The past supplies its momentum, and the future exerts its gravity. You stand in the middle, believing you choose, while in reality, you are responding to two forces at once. This makes your identity less a static entity, and more a dialogue across time. Who you are is not only the echo of who you were, but also the voice of who you will be. You are a bridge suspended between memory and destiny, built plank by plank, each side shaping the other. The implications are unsettling, but also liberating. If your future self is pulling you, then the self you wish to become matters profoundly. Choose a vision too small, and it will shrink your past to fit. Choose a vision worthy enough, and it will rewrite your history as a training ground, even the painful parts recast as necessary preparation. The past becomes bearable, even meaningful, because the future insists on pulling you through it. Think of how survivors of hardship often reinterpret their past. The suffering does not vanish, but it is reframed as fuel for resilience, courage, or compassion. The future self who lives with meaning and strength has reached back and restructured the narrative, pulling the earlier self through despair into coherence. So ask yourself, which self is pulling you now? The one resigned to repetition, or the one reaching toward transformation? The pull is real either way, and it is not passive. It is shaping your memories, editing your beginnings, rewriting the story of who you believe you have always been. The paradox is that you are both the author and the reader of your life, both the sculptor and the clay. Your future self is not waiting at the finish line. It is already here, tugging at your choices, whispering into your memories, bending the story backward so that when you finally arrive, you will believe you were always meant to. Perhaps that is the true mystery of selfhood, that the person you are becoming has always been shaping the person you believe you were. Observer alters past. You may believe the past is immune to your gaze, that what has happened is sealed, indifferent to whether you look or not. But physics and psychology both whisper otherwise. The observer does not simply record the past, the observer alters it. In the quantum world, this is explicit. A particle exists in a haze of possibilities until it is measured. Only when the observer looks does the wave collapse into a definite outcome. But here's the paradox. The act of observation doesn't just describe the present, it reshapes how we describe the past. Did the photon go through one slit, or both? The answer is decided retroactively, once the measurement is made. In this way, the observer changes the history. Your mind behaves no differently. Memory is not a neutral recording, but an active observation. Each time you recall, you do not retrieve the original. You rebuild it, and in rebuilding, you alter it. The details shift, the colors fade or sharpen. New meaning is added. Each act of remembering is an act of editing, a collapse of possibilities into one version. The observer, you, alters the past by observing it. This is why two people can live through the same event, but remember it differently. Their observations create different histories, and even within one person, the same memory mutates depending on when it is recalled. The observer in the future looks back and rewrites the observer in the past. The history is never fixed. It is perpetually rewritten by the act of looking. Consider how photographs or journals change your memory. Without them, events blur. With them, the act of revisiting alters what you remember. You begin to recall the photograph rather than the event, the story you told rather than what happened. The observer of today overwrites the witness of yesterday. In this sense, the past is not what occurred. It is what is observed now. Even silence alters history. Memories you never revisit fade, becoming less real, less certain. They dissolve not because they were unimportant, but because the observer has chosen not to look. The absence of observation erases as effectively as misremembering does. The observer shapes the archive by deciding where to shine the light. This paradox extends to identity. You believe who you are is built from past experiences, but those experiences are not stable. They are mutable, shaped by how you look at them today. Change your perspective, and the past rearranges. The same event can serve as proof of weakness or resilience, failure or learning. The event did not change. The observer did, and in changing, the past itself changes. This recursive loop means your future self is always altering your past. When you look back tomorrow, you will be a different observer than you are today, with new context, new desires, new beliefs. The past you remember will not be the same past you recall now. It will have been rewritten by tomorrow's gaze. The observer of the future reshapes the observer of the past. Even science outside quantum mechanics reflects this. In history, the act of studying the past changes it. New documents appear, new interpretations are offered, and suddenly what was true becomes different. The past does not change, but the narrative does, and the narrative is what survives. Historians are observers, collapsing infinite possibilities into a single account. What is remembered as history is not what happened, but what was observed and recorded. This truth is unsettling, because it removes the comfort of permanence. You want the past to be solid, to anchor you, but perhaps it is better understood as fluid, altered by every act of looking, every word chosen to describe it. You are not bound by yesterday, because yesterday is not stable. You alter it each time you turn your attention to it. So the next time you remember, notice how much power you hold. You are not retrieving a file. You are collapsing a wave. You are deciding what the past was, at least for now. Tomorrow you may observe differently, and the past will shift again. The observer alters the past, not once, but always. And this is the paradox you live in. The more you look backward, the more you change what you see. The past is not a museum, it is a mirror, and each gaze alters its reflection. Perhaps this is why you sometimes feel as though the past has betrayed you. It has not. It has only obeyed the law that governs both particles and memories, that observation is not passive. Observation is creation. And so, when you look back, you are not only remembering, you are rewriting. You are not only the product of your past, you are its author, altering its shape with every glance. Collapsing choices backward. Every moment of your life seems to open into many possibilities. You stand at a crossroads, believing that countless futures could unfold depending on the choice you make. Yet what if those futures are not truly open? What if the act of choosing does not just collapse probability forward, but also backward, rewriting the path that led you here, rearranging the past to fit the outcome you will eventually live? Physics hints at this strange possibility. In quantum experiments, particles exist in multiple states until observed. Once measured, the wave collapses into one reality. But here is the unsettling twist. The collapse doesn't only affect what comes next, it alters how we describe what has already happened. The path taken backward in time is determined only once the choice is made. The past waits for the future to finalize it. Your life may work the same way. Before a major decision, to love, to leave, to risk, to remain, your past feels uncertain, filled with meanings that could point in any direction. But the moment you decide, your history collapses into alignment. Suddenly, earlier moments appear as if they had always been leading here. What once seemed like random events become foreshadowing. What once seemed like multiple paths becomes one inevitable thread. Your choice reached backward and decided not only your future, but also your past. This is why decisions feel heavier than they appear. They are not confined to the moment. They ripple backward, collapsing ambiguity into certainty, writing the story of how you arrived. A casual meeting becomes destiny if it leads to love. A missed opportunity becomes defining if it leads to regret. The choice ahead of you is not only sculpting tomorrow, it is collapsing yesterday into coherence. Think of how memory shifts after a decision. When you commit to a path, you recall your past differently. Selective memories rise to the surface, while others fade. The mind edits the archive to match the outcome. It is as though the decision sends a command backward. Rewrite the story so it looks inevitable. You convince yourself you always knew, though the knowing only appeared once the choice was made. This retroactive collapse is why alternative histories vanish so quickly. Once you choose, the other possibilities lose weight. They feel unreal, as though they were never truly possible. The mind erases them to protect coherence, to prevent the unbearable thought that your past could have led elsewhere. And yet, faint echoes remain, the haunting sense of what might have been. Those echoes are reminders that until the collapse, the past was wider, less certain, more open. Regret emerges when you look back at those echoes. It is the awareness that a different choice could have collapsed your history differently. But even regret carries its paradox. By regretting, you reinforce the inevitability of the path you took. The regretful self and the satisfied self both collapse the past backward. The difference is only in tone. One paints the past as wasted, the other as purposeful. Either way, the choice in the future has dictated the meaning of the past. Culture enshrines this in narrative. Biographies often describe early events as though they clearly pointed to the eventual outcome. The inventor who tinkered as a child, the leader who showed charisma in school. But these details are chosen because of the ending. Had the person's life unfolded differently, other details would have been highlighted instead. The collapse backward has already occurred. The past is reconstructed to match the chosen future. This realization changes how you see your own story. You may believe your past defines you, but in truth, your decisions ahead will decide what your past was. The meaning of your childhood, your relationships, your struggles, all are still unsettled, waiting for your future to collapse them into narrative. Who you become will dictate who you believe you have always been. The paradox is liberating. If your past is not fixed but open to reinterpretation, then you are not trapped by it. You carry not one history but many possible histories, and the choices you make now decide which one becomes real. The self you are becoming collapses backward, selecting the memories that matter, discarding those that don't, aligning the story into coherence. So when you face a decision, recognize its double weight. It is not only the future that is at stake, it is the past as well. Each choice is a collapse that reshapes the timeline, pulling yesterday into alignment with tomorrow. You do not merely move forward, you rewrite backward. And perhaps this is why you sometimes feel as though the past has shifted beneath you, why memories change, why meanings blur. The collapse has not yet occurred. Your history is still open, waiting for your next decision to give it shape. Every choice, then, is a creation not only of what will be, but of what has been. You are not only the author of your future, you are the editor of your past. Reverse free will. You grow up believing that free will flows forward, that you stand in the present, surveying possibilities, and choose among them, sending ripples into the future. Choice feels like forward motion, freedom as a push into what is yet to come. But what if this too is an illusion? What if free will runs in reverse? What if the future is already fixed, and the choices you feel yourself making now are simply the backward echoes of what has already been decided? Neuroscience suggests the possibility. Brain scans reveal activity seconds before a conscious decision is reported. The brain commits first, awareness comes later. From your perspective, it feels like you decided in the present. But in reality, the decision was already in motion, and consciousness arrived only to narrate it afterward. Free will, in this sense, is not an engine, but an echo. You choose, but only after the choice has been made. Yet the paradox grows stranger. If decisions can begin before conscious awareness, why not before memory itself? What if the choice you experience today has been seeded by a future outcome already waiting? The sensation of freedom would then be reversed. Not you moving toward the future, but the future reaching back and pulling you, convincing you that you acted freely. Consider déjà vu, that eerie feeling of inevitability. You believe you are free in the moment, yet the moment feels scripted, already chosen. This may be the clearest glimpse of reverse free will, the uncanny recognition that your choices are not fresh acts, but fulfillments of something already written. You are not inventing, you are aligning. This idea unsettles because it challenges the very core of identity. If your choices are predetermined, what becomes of responsibility? But perhaps responsibility is not erased, it is reframed. You are responsible not for creating the path, but for how you walk it. You are responsible for recognizing that the freedom you feel may be the shadow of the future, cast backward, shaping your story in ways you cannot yet see. Philosophy has long circled this paradox. Spinoza argued that free will is the illusion of being conscious of our desires while ignorant of their causes. In reverse free will, the causes are not only hidden but waiting in the future, quietly shaping the desires that feel spontaneous. You think you want because of who you are. In truth, you may be who you are because of what you will want. Even your memories are caught in this loop. When you decide something today, you retroactively rewrite your past to make it feel inevitable. You tell yourself, I was always leaning this way. In that rewriting, you reinforce the illusion of free will flowing forward. But the truth may be that your choice was never born in the present. It was an echo from the future, rewritten backward into your past. This reframes destiny as more than superstition. If your future self already exists in some form, then the freedom you feel now may be that self's influence bleeding into you. The sense of making a fresh decision is the echo of your future's inevitability. You are not choosing, you are catching up. But this is not despair. Reverse free will can also be liberating. If the future is already reaching into you, then even your struggles are meaningful. The obstacles you face may be part of the pull, shaping the version of you who will emerge. You may not be inventing the path, but you are still becoming someone capable of walking it. The illusion of freedom might be necessary, not because you control the future, but because you need to believe you do in order to align with it. Think of art. A painter may feel each brushstroke is spontaneous, but in hindsight, the painting reveals a coherence that seems inevitable. The artist did not know the end while painting, but the end was always waiting, pulling the strokes toward it. Reverse free will is like this. Your choices feel free, but only because you cannot yet see the finished canvas. So perhaps freedom is not about creating new paths, but about recognizing the pull of the path already written. Perhaps your role is not to invent, but to discover, to notice how the future echoes backward, whispering into your desires, shaping your sense of choice. And when you pause to reflect on your next decision, remember, you may already have chosen. The choice may be pulling you even now, reaching backward through time, convincing you that you are free. The paradox, then, is this: free will is not the act of writing the future. It is the experience of the future writing you. Emotional forecast memory. Emotions are supposed to be reactions, signals of what is happening now or echoes of what has already occurred. But what if emotions are not just reactive? What if they are forecasts, faint predictions shaped by futures you haven't lived yet? And what if those emotional forecasts not only influence how you experience the present, but also quietly rewrite how you remember the past? Psychology has long studied the power of affective forecasting, the way humans predict how they will feel about future events. Often we misjudge, overestimating the joy of a success or the despair of a setback. Yet beneath these errors lies something deeper. Emotions are not tethered to the present alone. They are constantly simulating futures, creating shadows of feeling that seep backward into memory. Think of anticipation. The joy of a holiday begins long before the holiday arrives. The dread of an exam shapes weeks leading up to it. These emotions are not reactions to the event, but rehearsals of it. And when you look back later, the anticipation itself becomes part of the memory. The holiday seems brighter because you recall not only the days you lived, but the days you spent anticipating. The exam feels heavier because the dread extended far beyond the moment of sitting in the room. The future emotion reached back and rewrote the past. Even regret functions this way. You regret not only what you did, but what you now imagine you could have felt had you chosen differently. The imagined emotional future casts its shadow backward, altering the memory of the choice itself. You tell yourself you should have known, though the knowing only exists now, in the hindsight of emotional forecasting. Neuroscience reveals that memory and imagination share the same neural circuits. The hippocampus, the brain's archive of the past, is also its theater of the future. When you remember, you are not replaying but reconstructing. When you imagine, you are using the same machinery. This overlap explains why emotional forecasts can infiltrate memory. The same circuits that imagine how you will feel tomorrow can overwrite how you believe you felt yesterday. This blurring is visible in everyday storytelling. When you recall a difficult event, you rarely describe only what happened. You describe how you felt, or how you thought you felt. But those feelings are colored by future outcomes. A hardship that led to growth is remembered as less painful. A challenge that ended in failure is remembered as heavier. The emotional forecast from the future rewrote the emotion of the past. Even in small ways, emotions rearrange memory. A joyful ending can make an entire experience feel positive, even if most of it was unpleasant. Psychologists call this the peak end rule. We remember an event not by its duration, but by its most intense point and its ending. The ending is the future of the event, but it decides how the beginning and middle are remembered. Emotion forecasts backward, shaping what feels true about the past. Cultural rituals harness this paradox. Weddings, funerals, graduations, each creates an emotional frame that reshapes how the preceding years are remembered. A funeral retroactively saturates memories with loss, even if the days leading up were joyful. A wedding reframes awkward first meetings as romantic destiny. The emotion of the future event radiates backward, rewriting memory in its glow. But here is the paradox within the paradox. These emotional forecasts often feel more real than the emotions actually experienced. You may have dreaded an exam more than you suffered through it. You may have anticipated a holiday with more joy than you felt when it arrived. Yet in memory, the forecast often dominates, overshadowing the event itself. What you feel about the future is sometimes more powerful in shaping memory than what you felt in the moment. This means your past is not a stable archive of feelings. It is a shifting landscape, continually repainted by emotional forecasts that flow backward from futures you have not yet lived. Your identity is not built only from what you felt, but from what you expected to feel. You are stitched together from rehearsals of tomorrow, as much as from recollections of yesterday. So pause for a moment, and consider, what emotions are you forecasting now? What dread or hope, what anticipation or regret, is already shaping how you will one day remember today? The future is not silent. Its feelings are already spilling backward, altering the texture of your present and the color of your past. Perhaps this is why certain memories feel prophetic. You recall them as though you always knew how they would turn out. But in truth, it was not knowledge. It was emotional forecasting. the future's feelings reaching backward to tint the past. And so you live in a loop where emotions are not just reactions but architects, bending time, rewriting memory, making the past less a record of what was felt and more a canvas painted by what is still to come. Backward planted rituals. Rituals are usually thought of as anchors to the past. Traditions repeated to honor where we came from, to preserve memory, to keep continuity alive. Yet look closer, and you'll notice something stranger. Many rituals are not about the past at all. They are about the future reaching backward, planting itself in the present, so that when you look back, it feels inevitable. Rituals are seeds from ahead, quietly rewriting the ground you thought you had already walked. Take the ritual of graduation. The ceremony is not necessary for knowledge. The diploma does not change the years of study, but the ritual reframes the entire journey. Suddenly, all the late nights, all the failures, all the tiny victories become chapters leading to this moment. The ritual does not simply celebrate the past, it edits it, collapsing ambiguity into coherence. It tells you that you were always on this path, even if you doubted along the way. The ritual is a future event that rearranges the meaning of your history. Marriage works in the same way. The vows are spoken in the present, yet they cast their weight backward. Every earlier conversation, every moment of meeting, every fleeting uncertainty is rewritten as foreshadowing. The ritual plants itself in the timeline, altering what came before. The love did not always feel destined, but once the ritual arrives, it makes the past appear inevitable. Even funerals function this way. A life lived in fragments is gathered into a single story. The ritual selects which memories to highlight, which to silence, creating coherence where there was once only chaos. The ending writes the beginning. The ritual, though held in the future of a person's timeline, reaches back to reshape the way their entire life is remembered. Cultures intuitively recognize this backward power. Seasonal rituals, harvest festivals, rites of passage, each is a way of declaring meaning in advance. The ritual says this future moment will matter, and therefore everything that leads to it will matter too. By establishing significance ahead of time, the ritual changes the way you experience and later recall the journey. Psychologists glimpse this in memory scaffolding. Rituals provide narrative frameworks that reshape recollection. When you think back, you remember not the raw events, but the ritual that organized them. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, these recurring markers are less about repeating the past than about planting reference points that future you will use to edit the past. Without rituals, memory is noise. With them, memory becomes a story. But the paradox deepens. Some rituals are private, created not by culture but by individuals. You may light a candle before writing, touch a keepsake before sleep, or whisper words before a challenge. These acts are not about the present. They are signals sent to the future, reminders to a later self that this moment mattered. When you look back, the ritual elevates what might have been forgotten into something meaningful. The small act plants itself backward, altering the way the past will one day be recalled. Even mistakes can become rituals retroactively. A stumble that repeats becomes a pattern becomes a ritual, the ritual becomes a story. What once felt accidental is later remembered as symbolic, as if it had been part of the plan all along. The future collapse of meaning reaches back and plants the ritual in the past. This recursive loop suggests that rituals are not only preservers of history, but creators of it. They are the hand of the future, reaching backward, imposing order on fragments, ensuring that the past will read as coherent. Without them, time would scatter into endless moments. With them, time is arranged into arcs that feel destined. Even physics offers a metaphor here. In time-symmetric models, boundary conditions at both ends of time constrain the system in between. Rituals act as boundary conditions. They set the meaning of what has happened by fixing a point in the future. Once the ritual occurs, the past bends toward it, aligning itself as if it had always been leading here. So ask yourself, what rituals are you planting now? Which moments of your life will future ceremonies retroactively edit into coherence? The graduation, the vow, the farewell. These are not simply future events, they are time machines, reaching backward to sculpt the way you will remember your journey. Perhaps this is why rituals feel sacred. They are not just repetitions of tradition, they are intersections where the future edits the past, where meaning flows backward through time. To participate in a ritual is to agree to be rewritten, to let tomorrow sculpt yesterday into a story that feels inevitable. And so, backward planted rituals remind you of the paradox you live every day, that the past is never complete, never sealed, always waiting for the future to give it shape. Delayed choice science. In most of life, we assume decisions flow in one direction, you choose, and then consequences unfold. The future depends on the present, and the present is shaped by the past. But the experiments of delayed choice tell a stranger story, one where the choice can be made after the fact, reaching backward, as if the universe itself were waiting for you to decide what had already happened. The original thought experiment was proposed by John Wheeler. Imagine a photon traveling toward a pair of slits. If you set up your apparatus to measure which slit it passes through, the photon behaves like a particle, choosing one path. If you set it up differently, without measurement, it behaves like a wave, passing through both slits at once. But Wheeler added a twist. What if you delay your decision? What if you wait until after the photon has passed the slits before choosing how to measure? Logic insists the photon must already have decided which path it took, and yet the outcome suggests otherwise. The photon's past behavior seems to depend on a choice made later. This is not illusion. Variations of Wheeler's experiment have been performed, and the results persist. The universe does not behave as though events are locked in order. It behaves as though the past remains provisional, awaiting the future's collapse. The delayed choice determines not only what you see, but what has been. Consider how this mirrors your own life. You look back on a memory, perhaps a childhood struggle, a friendship lost, a moment of chance. At the time, the meaning was uncertain, but later, after choices have been made and futures have unfolded, you reinterpret that moment. Suddenly it appears inevitable. The beginning rewrites itself to fit the ending. Your delayed choice has reshaped your past. This recursive rewriting is everywhere. A career path you take reframes early interests as destiny. A breakup recasts early doubts as warnings. A reunion turns awkward beginnings into evidence of enduring connection. The past waits for your delayed choice to decide what it always meant. You are not just living forward. You are editing backward. Even your memories of identity follow this logic. The person you say you were is not fixed. It shifts depending on the story your current choices require. The student becomes the rebel. The rebel becomes the visionary. The visionary becomes the ordinary neighbor. Nothing in the past changed, yet everything did, because the delayed choice of the present has rewritten the archive. Neuroscience supports this paradox. Memory reconsolidation shows that each time you recall an event, it becomes malleable again, open to change. The act of remembering is like reopening a file. Whatever choice you make now about how to frame it will be stored as though it had always been there. Your delayed choice edits not only how you remember, but what you believe happened. This is why people often argue over shared memories. Each person has made different delayed choices about meaning, collapsing the past into divergent versions. To you, the conversation was warm. To another, it was tense. Both recall the same words, but the meaning has been rewritten by choices made later, in futures that diverged. The past is plural, waiting to be fixed by delayed observation. The implications stretch into ethics as well. How do you judge a decision until you know its outcome? An act that seemed foolish may later be remembered as courageous if it led to growth. An act that seemed wise may be remembered as reckless if it led to disaster. The same event is rewritten by delayed choice, and history calls it inevitable. Even culture enshrines this paradox. Historical events are reinterpreted constantly depending on present needs. Revolutions are cast as noble or chaotic, leaders as heroes or villains, depending on the delayed choices of the present observing them. The past has no single version. It is sculpted by the contexts that arrive later, rewritten each time the narrative shifts. So perhaps your life is less like a river flowing forward, and more like a manuscript written in erasable ink. Each choice you make is not confined to the page ahead. It bleeds backward, editing the pages behind. The book is never finished. The past remains provisional, until the future finalizes it. This realization is not despair but possibility. It means your story is not imprisoned by what has already happened. The meaning of your past is still open, still waiting for choices not yet made. Every delayed choice will send its ripples backward, altering what you believe was true all along. And so the paradox becomes clear. You are not only the author of tomorrow, you are the editor of yesterday. The future's choices collapse the past into coherence. Delayed choice science is not just physics. It is the architecture of your own life. Regret before action. Regret is supposed to arrive after a choice. The sting of hindsight, the ache of what cannot be undone. Yet sometimes it comes earlier. You feel regret before you act, as though your body already knows the disappointment waiting for you on the other side. This strange preemptive sorrow bends the arrow of time, suggesting that regret is not a backward-facing emotion at all, but a forward one, a shadow cast from a decision you have not yet made. Think of the hesitation you feel before sending a message you know you'll wish unsent, before stepping into a room you know will leave you uneasy, before saying yes when your whole body leans toward no. The regret is already there, coiled in your chest, waiting for the action to confirm it. It is not the past whispering, it is the future warning. Psychologists call this anticipated regret. Studies show that people often make decisions not to maximize happiness, but to minimize the regret they imagine they will feel later. In other words, regret exists before the action, shaping behavior in advance. It is a feeling from ahead, reaching backward to alter the path. You are not only avoiding pain, you are obeying the shadow of a future you have not lived. Neuroscience supports this paradox. The brain's orbit of frontal cortex, involved in evaluating outcomes, activates not just after losses, but in anticipation of them. Your nervous system rehearses the regret before the event occurs. By the time you act, the regret is already woven into the decision. You are not reacting, you are fulfilling what was foretold. This anticipatory sorrow does more than shape choices. It rewrites memories. Once regret takes hold, earlier events are cast in a harsher light. You reinterpret warnings you ignored, clues you missed, voices you silenced. You convince yourself the regret was inevitable, that the signs were always there, but in truth, the signs only appear in retrospect, summoned by the regret itself. The emotion is not only forward-facing, it collapses backward, rearranging the past into a narrative of inevitability. Consider how regret before action influences entire lives. Someone stays in a safe job, not because they love it, but because they can already feel the regret of failing elsewhere. Someone avoids a relationship not because they don't want it, but because they sense the sorrow of heartbreak ahead. In both cases, the regret is not from what has happened, but from what might happen, and in avoiding it, they create a past that aligns with the regret anyway. This creates a strange paradox. Regret can shape the story, even if the dreaded event never occurs. You may never send the message, never take the risk, never speak the truth, yet you will carry the regret as though you had. The future possibility bends backward, leaving its mark on your past. You regret not only what happened but what never had the chance to. And then there is the cruelest twist. Sometimes you feel regret before action, but you act anyway. The sorrow arrives early, you ignore it, and then it arrives again, heavier, once the choice is made. In that moment the regret feels doubled, as though the future had warned you and you betrayed it. This deepens the illusion that the regret was always there, written into your past, when in fact it was a loop, playing twice, once from the future, and once from the present. Culture encodes this paradox in proverbs. Listen to your gut, you'll regret it later. These sayings are acknowledgments of regret's time-bending nature. They remind us that regret is not merely the price of mistakes but the ghost of futures already pulling at us. To ignore it is to risk walking into a sorrow that has already announced itself. But perhaps regret before action is not only a warning, perhaps it is also a gift. If you can feel tomorrow's sorrow today, then you can change course. You can edit the past before it is written. The preemptive ache becomes a guide, not a punishment. It whispers, do not plant this regret. Choose differently, so that tomorrow does not have to rewrite yesterday in grief. Still, the paradox remains, even when you avoid regret, you may later regret having avoided it. A safe choice that saved you from pain may later feel like a missed opportunity. The regret you thought you escaped has only shifted form, bending backward from a different future. No matter which way you turn, regret finds a way to reach into your past, altering the way you recall it. And so you learn that regret is not bound to time. It is both anticipatory and retrospective, both a shadow of what has happened and a whisper of what has not. It belongs to the past, the present, and the future, all at once. Perhaps this is why regret feels so heavy. It is not one emotion but a loop, a sorrow that runs in both directions, rewriting the past even before the action is taken. So the next time you feel regret before action, pause. Ask yourself, is this sorrow coming from behind, or is it the future calling to you? Either way, know this, your past is not yet finished. It is still being written, and regret is one of the pens that writes it. Sometimes from tomorrow, sometimes from today, sometimes from yesterday, all at once. Body senses future. Your body is often described as a machine reacting to the present, storing the past in scars and muscle memory. But look closer, and you'll find a stranger possibility. Your body may also be sensing the future, responding to events that have not yet arrived, carrying the echo of tomorrow in its nerves, its pulse, its breath. Experiments hint at this mystery. In studies of presentiment, participants are shown images chosen at random. Monitors record their heart rate, skin conductance, and brain activity. Again and again the body registers changes seconds before the emotional image is revealed. The pulse quickens, the skin tingles, the pupils widen, as if the body already knows what is coming. Skeptics call it coincidence or error, but the data persists, suggesting the nervous system may be porous to time. Even outside the lab, you felt it. A chill before bad news, a heaviness before an accident, a surge of calm before joy. You dismiss it as intuition, as chance. But what if it is not? What if the body is not reacting early, but receiving faint signals from the future, whispering back into the present? Think of instinct. Evolution shaped it as a survival tool. Yet instinct often seems faster than cause. You pull your hand back before realizing the stove is hot. You step aside before the object falls. You feel unease in a room before danger becomes clear. These reactions suggest more than quick processing. They suggest a body anticipating futures before they arrive, moving you out of harm's way, not because of what is, but because of what will be. Memory bends here too. Once the future unfolds, the body's earlier signals are reinterpreted as warnings. You recall the shiver as omen, the unease as foresight. The meaning of the sensation is not fixed in the moment, but retroactively assigned. The future reaches back, claiming the body's whisper as evidence that it had always been sensed. This loop extends to emotion. The body does not merely feel what has been lived, it feels what is still ahead. Anticipatory anxiety is the clearest example. Your heart races, your breath shortens, your stomach churns, not because danger is here, but because it might come. Later, even if the danger never arrives, the body's memory of anxiety rewrites the past, convincing you that the threat was real. The body carried the future into the archive of the past. But the paradox grows stranger. Sometimes the body seems to remember futures that never occur, a premonition of loss that does not happen, a dread that proves unfounded. Yet even unrealized, the sensation lingers in memory, shaping identity. You recall the fear as though it mattered, as though it foretold something. The body writes futures into the past even if they never arrive. This suggests that identity is not built only from lived experiences, but from felt anticipations. Who you are includes not just the scars of what happened, but the echoes of what might. The body senses futures like a tuning fork, resonating with possibilities, and those vibrations sculpt the self as surely as history does. Culture recognizes this intuitively. Rituals of divination, omens, bodily signs, they are all acknowledgements of the body's uncanny sensitivity to what has not yet occurred. A dream interpreted as prophecy, a sudden illness taken as warning, a pulse read as alignment with destiny. Science dismisses these as superstition, but perhaps they are metaphors for something real, the body's porousness to time. Even love feels this way. You meet someone and feel the rush before anything has happened. Your body reacts as though already remembering what is to come. The pulse of attachment, the certainty of connection, often precedes the experiences that justify it. The body moves ahead of the narrative, sensing futures not yet written, and when the relationship unfolds, the memory of that first rush is reframed as prophecy, as though your body had always known. This is the paradox you live in. Your body is not a clock ticking in sync with the present. It is a resonant chamber, vibrating with signals from ahead, folding them back into the present, storing them as though they were always part of the past. So ask yourself, when your heart races for no reason, when your stomach knots, when your skin tingles, is it only the present speaking, or is it tomorrow whispering into your nerves? Perhaps your body has always been more than a vessel of history. Perhaps it has always been the first to greet the future. Retroactive identity stories. Who you believe you are is not a simple accumulation of experiences. It is a story, told and retold, rearranged and reinterpreted. The paradox is that this story is not fixed in the past. It is retroactive. You write your identity backward, editing who you were to align with who you are becoming. Think of how people describe themselves. Rarely do they give a raw inventory of events. Instead, they narrate. They choose which memories matter, which to highlight, which to omit. The child who once felt lost may later describe themselves as a seeker. The student who once failed may later call themselves resilient. The raw data of experience is the same, but the story is different because the storyteller has changed. Identity is less a record and more an interpretation, one rewritten by the needs of the future. Psychologists call this narrative identity. It is not the past that dictates who you are, but the way you tell the past, and the way you tell the past is influenced by the present, which is itself influenced by what lies ahead. You become the editor of your own biography, reshaping the earlier chapters to match the trajectory you are now following. Consider how a decision today can reach back and alter your sense of self. If you choose to dedicate yourself to art, suddenly childhood doodles feel prophetic. If you pursue medicine, those doodles fade into irrelevance, and instead, your curiosity in science becomes the sign. Both versions of you are plausible. The one that feels true is the one that aligns with your current and future path. Your identity story is retroactively written. Even regrets follow this logic. You may look back at a relationship and decide it defined you, not because of how it felt then, but because of what you know now. The person you are today reaches backward, recasting who you were then. The story you tell about your identity is less about events than about coherence. You rewrite your past self to make sense of your present self. This recursive editing is not deception. It is survival. Without it, your life would feel like a series of disconnected fragments. Narrative gives continuity, even if the continuity is an illusion. And the illusion works because the future is always pulling on the thread, rearranging the earlier beads to create a necklace that looks like it was strung with intention. Culture encodes this paradox in myth and history. Leaders are remembered as destined, their childhoods reframed as foreshadowing their greatness. Artists are remembered as visionaries, their early struggles reframed as necessary suffering. Villains are remembered as corrupt from the start, even if they once lived ordinary lives. These stories are not discovered in the past. They are imposed from the future, retroactively rewriting identity to make it appear inevitable. Neuroscience supports this. Memory is not stored as a permanent record, but reconstructed each time it is recalled. Each retrieval opens it to change, influenced by current emotions and expectations. Identity works the same way. Each time you tell your story, you reconstruct yourself, altering the past to match the present. Tomorrow you may tell it differently again, and yesterday will shift along with it. This is why identity feels both stable and fragile. Stable, because the story gives continuity. Fragile, because the story can always be rewritten. You are both the author and the character, both the witness and the editor. The you of yesterday is not a fixed truth but a draft, waiting for the you of tomorrow to revise it. Even silence plays a role. The parts of your story you refuse to tell fade, becoming less real, less part of your identity. They are not erased, but they are hidden, backgrounded, omitted from the narrative. Later, a new future may invite them back in, reinterpreting them as meaningful. What was once ignored becomes essential. Identity is never final. It is always waiting for the future to decide what matters. So when you say, "This is who I am," recognize the paradox. You are not describing a fixed truth. You are telling a story that will be revised again. Who you were yesterday depends on who you will be tomorrow. The self you cling to is already being edited by a future you cannot yet see. This is not weakness. It is possibility. It means you are not trapped by your past. Your history is still malleable, waiting for your future self to give it shape. The story of who you are is not finished. It is still being written, and it always will be. Perhaps this is the true meaning of identity. Not a fixed essence but a narrative that flows backward, rewritten endlessly by the self still waiting ahead. Mirrors from ahead. Life often feels like walking through a hall of mirrors. You see yourself reflected everywhere, in memories, in relationships, in the choices you've made. But the strangest mirrors are not the ones behind you. They are the ones ahead. These mirrors reflect futures not yet lived, and yet when you look into them, you recognize yourself. You are haunted by versions of who you might become, and those reflections quietly reach backward, rearranging who you believe you've always been. Think of how you sometimes imagine yourself in 10 years. The picture feels speculative, but the moment you see it, it begins shaping the past. If you imagine a successful self, you begin to reinterpret struggles as training. If you imagine a broken self, you reinterpret the same struggles as omens. The reflection ahead determines which memories matter. It becomes a mirror you did not know you were already looking into. Psychologists call this the possible selves theory, the mental images you hold of who you might be in the future. These images are not passive, they influence choices now, but more subtly, they also edit the past. The possible self acts like a mirror from ahead, reflecting backward, convincing you that your history was always pointing here. Even small reflections work this way. A child sees themselves as a future artist, and suddenly recalls every doodle as evidence. Another sees themselves as an athlete, and recalls every playground sprint as foreshadowing. Both narratives are plausible. The mirror that wins is the one that reflects most powerfully from ahead, capturing the gaze of the present and bending the past toward it. This backward reflection is not limited to ambition. It operates in fear as well. You glimpse a future self alone, or diminished, or wasted, and suddenly your memories darken. Conversations once warm become tinged with failure. Moments of joy become haunted by absence. The mirror ahead is not only flattering, it can be cruel, and yet whether luminous or harsh, it rewrites who you believe you have been. Culture has long understood this. Prophecies, destinies, archetypes, they are mirrors set in the future, shaping how people interpret their lives. The prophecy of greatness turns accidents into signs. The prophecy of doom turns them into warnings. What is reflected is less important than the fact that the reflection bends backward, sculpting the path already walked. Neuroscience offers a clue. The same brain regions activate when remembering the past and imagining the future. The machinery does not distinguish between reflection backward and forward. A mirror is a mirror, and the mind leans into both. This explains why futures can feel familiar, as though already remembered. When you imagine yourself ahead, the brain builds the image with the same circuits it uses for memory. The reflection feels real because, in a sense, it is. Mirrors from ahead also explain why certain moments feel inevitable. When you look back after reaching them, you realize you had already glimpsed the reflection. The possibility was always hovering in front of you, quietly shaping how you interpreted the past. When it finally arrives, you feel you were always staring into that mirror. Even regret obeys this loop. When you fail to align with a reflection you once imagined, your past is rewritten with absence. You recall the missed chances, the wrong turns, the doubts you ignored. The mirror ahead was not fulfilled, and so your history becomes the story of how you failed to reach it. The pain is not only of the future lost, but of the past rewritten to highlight its absence. Yet this paradox carries possibility too. If futures can reflect backward, then you are not trapped by the past. You can choose which mirror you look into. Choose one of despair, and the past darkens to match. Choose one of meaning, and the past brightens as preparation. The past is not fixed because the mirrors ahead are not fixed. You are surrounded by reflections, and whichever one you attend to becomes the one that rewrites who you were. Think of standing in a hall of mirrors. Some show you broken, others luminous, others ordinary. As you move, your gaze selects one, and that selection determines which reflection becomes true, not just for tomorrow but for yesterday too. The self you are becoming edits the self you have always been. So the next time you imagine a future self, pause. Notice how quickly the reflection begins reshaping your past. Ask yourself, which mirror am I looking into? And is it one I want to rewrite myself with? Because the paradox is this. You are not only reflected backward from your memories, you are also reflected backward from your futures. Your life is not just the story of where you have been. It is the story of which mirror from ahead you allowed to define who you always were, destiny already carved. You are taught to believe in possibility, in the wide-open future, in paths you can shape by will. Yet deep down you sometimes sense the opposite, that destiny is already carved, etched into the grain of time, waiting for you to discover what has always been there. This paradox unsettles because it suggests you are not inventing your life but uncovering it, like a sculptor revealing a form that has already been cut into the stone. Think of how certain events feel inevitable in retrospect. A chance meeting that becomes a lifelong bond, a detour that leads to transformation, a mistake that plants the seed of wisdom. When you look back, it does not feel random. It feels scripted, as though the path was always guiding you here. The present convinces you that the past was carved in advance. Even myths and religions speak this language. Fate, karma, providence, all are metaphors for the same intuition, that the future is not written by us, but inscribed already, waiting for us to arrive. Ancient cultures described life as a thread, woven by unseen hands. Modern physics, with its time-symmetric laws, offers a different metaphor, but arrives at a similar whisper. The equations do not prefer direction, and so your future may be as fixed as your past. This does not mean you feel powerless. Instead, you feel strangely guided, as if certain choices were never truly choices. You stand at a crossroads, but one road hums with inevitability. You sense it before you act, and once you take it, you tell yourself it was always meant to be. Perhaps it was. Perhaps your sense of freedom is simply the moment you align with a destiny already carved. Psychologists glimpse this in how we reframe memory. Once a major outcome has arrived, the earlier events are rewritten as foreshadowing. Failures become stepping stones, coincidences become signs, obstacles become necessary trials. The story feels coherent because the ending has carved itself backward, reshaping the beginning. What you call destiny may be this recursive loop, the future sculpting the past to make itself feel inevitable. Even in your body, destiny whispers. Instinct guides you towards some people, away from others. Gut feelings tug at your choices, and later you find yourself saying, "I just knew." But what if that knowing was not a prediction, but recognition? What if your body was simply aligning with a destiny already set? The echo of tomorrow vibrating through your nerves. Regret deepens the paradox. When you wish you had chosen differently, you are not only mourning the lost future, you are confronting the possibility that there was never another path at all. The regret feels like rebellion against destiny, yet the very act of regret confirms it. The missed chance becomes part of the carved design, an essential contour in the sculpture of your life. Even your resistance is included in the inevitability. Stories reveal this too. A novel's ending often feels as though it was inevitable all along, even if you never predicted it. Once the final page is read, you cannot imagine it closing differently. Life imitates this narrative structure. When you arrive at certain outcomes, the entire journey reshapes itself to fit the ending. The carving is revealed, and you realize the stone was never blank. But destiny is not always grand or comforting. Sometimes it feels like entrapment, like being pulled into patterns you cannot escape. A repeated mistake, a recurring sorrow, a cycle you swore to break, yet find yourself repeating. These too feel carved, etched into the grooves of your life. Perhaps destiny is not only about triumph, but also about repetition, about the loops that shape identity whether you wish them to or not. And yet, the paradox carries hope. If destiny is already carved, then your life has meaning woven into it whether you see it or not. Even the pain is part of the design. Even the confusion belongs. You may not control the carving, but you are the one uncovering it, piece by piece, with every step. Perhaps this is why people describe purpose as something discovered rather than invented. You do not create it. You stumble upon it, as if it had been waiting all along. The sculptor chips away at stone, and insists the figure was always inside. Maybe your destiny is the same, always there, waiting for you to reveal it. So pause for a moment. Look at your life not as a blank canvas but as a block of marble already carved. Notice how even now the contours feel familiar, as though you are tracing lines that were there before you touched them. The paradox is not whether destiny exists. The paradox is that you are both the sculptor and the sculpture, uncovering what has always been true while believing you chose it freely. Perhaps your future is not waiting to be written. Perhaps it is already carved, and your life is simply the act of discovering the design. Rehearsed endings. Endings feel like they should arrive suddenly, as closures you encounter only once. Yet if you pay attention, you'll notice something uncanny. Endings are rehearsed long before they arrive. You live fragments of them in dreams, in stray thoughts, in subtle emotions that surface months or years before the conclusion. And when the ending finally comes, it feels less like a surprise and more like recognition, as though you had already lived it many times in secret. Consider relationships. Long before the final conversation, you often feel the echoes. A silence grows heavier, a gesture feels strained, a goodbye lingers too long. These moments are not the ending, yet they carry its outline. They are rehearsals, teaching your body what will one day become official, and when the relationship ends, you remember these rehearsals as proof that you always knew. The ending has reached backward, claiming preparation as inevitability. The same happens in life's milestones. Retirement, departure, even death itself, each is rehearsed through smaller closures. Every time you finish a project, leave a room or say goodbye, you are practicing the art of ending. These rehearsals may seem trivial, but they are fragments of a script being written ahead of you. The future's closure casts its shadow backward, embedding itself in small acts long before the final curtain falls. Neuroscience reflects this pattern. The brain's predictive machinery constantly simulates outcomes, preparing you for what might come. Endings are especially rehearsed because they carry emotional weight. Your nervous system practices grief before loss, relief before resolution, nostalgia before departure. By the time the ending arrives, your body has already lived it dozens of times. The actual moment feels inevitable because the rehearsals have carved it into memory in advance. This explains why some endings feel familiar, even when they surprise you. The rehearsal was unconscious, woven into dreams, into quiet doubts, into subtle sensations. Only later do you recognize them as foreshadowing. The future did not come out of nowhere. It had been rehearsing in the background, waiting for you to notice. Even culture encodes this paradox. Rituals of closure, funerals, farewells, ceremonies, are rehearsals made visible. They allow you to live the ending before it arrives, to practice grief or celebration in symbolic form. These rituals reach backward, altering how you recall the journey. The rehearsal becomes the frame through which the ending feels complete. But the paradox deepens. The rehearsed ending does not only shape the future, it reshapes the past. Once the conclusion arrives, earlier moments are reinterpreted as part of the rehearsal. A fight that once felt trivial becomes a sign. A hesitation that once seemed random becomes foreshadowing. The ending collapses ambiguity, retroactively transforming fragments into preparation. This is why nostalgia is bittersweet. You recall not only the joy of beginnings but also the faint rehearsals of their endings. The first meeting is remembered alongside the awareness that it would one day conclude. The laughter carries the ghost of silence to come. Nostalgia is not a return to the past. It is a recognition of how the future had already been rehearsed there. Even your identity follows this rhythm. You rehearse endings of versions of yourself, long before you shed them. The student rehearses, becoming the professional. The child rehearses, becoming the adult. The healthy body rehearses, becoming fragile. Each transition is foreshadowed by fragments lived in advance, so that when the shift comes it feels both inevitable and strangely familiar. This does not mean endings are scripted in cruelty. It means they are porous, leaking backward into the present, preparing you in ways you only recognize later. The rehearsals soften the shock, embedding closure into the narrative before it arrives. You believe you are surprised, but in truth, you have been practicing for a long time. So the next time you sense the faint outline of an ending, a lingering goodbye, a dream that feels too final, a silence that carries weight, pause. It may not be the conclusion yet, but it is a rehearsal, a fragment of tomorrow slipping into today, and when the ending finally comes, you will look back and realize that you had always known. Because endings are not sudden, they are rehearsed, quietly and endlessly, until the future can no longer be postponed. The loop that writes you. You began this journey believing the past was behind you, a sealed archive, an unchangeable foundation, but by now you have felt the unsettling truth ripple through you. The past is not finished. It is porous, provisional, waiting for edits that come, not from memory, but from tomorrow. Every step you take bends backward. Every choice collapses meaning behind you. Every feeling is stitched, not only from what was lived, but from what is still on its way. This is the paradox that hums beneath everything. You are not walking a straight line from past into future. You are standing in the middle of a feedback loop, memory folding into prediction, endings sculpting beginnings, the future echoing backward into the archive you thought was fixed. Think of what we've uncovered. Footsteps before arrival showed that your journey feels pre-walked, as though you were always being guided here. Choices already waiting revealed that your decisions often feel less like creations and more like recognitions, collapsing multiple paths into one thread. In Echoes of Tomorrow and Anticipatory Memory Science, you saw how dreams, intuition, and even physiology whisper futures before they arrive, leaving you to believe you remembered them when really you rehearsed them. In Time-Symmetric Physics and Probability Bending Backwards, the universe itself offered no comfort of direction. The equations that govern reality do not privilege before or after. Probability collapses backward, meaning the past itself is provisional until the future arrives. In Delayed Choice Science, we discovered that not only does your present shape your future also determines what your past was all along. And then the deeply personal truths. Language rewrites memory, reminding you that the words you use tomorrow will decide who you believe you were yesterday. Future self-pulling showed you how destiny tugs from ahead, recasting your history as its preparation. Observer Alters Past revealed that memory itself is an act of rewriting, every recollection a new collapse of the wave, and retroactive identity stories laid bare that who you are is not a record of what happened, but a narrative shaped by who you are still becoming. By the time we arrived at destiny already carved, the paradox was undeniable. The block of marble was never blank. You are the sculptor and the sculpture at once, uncovering what was always etched in the stone, while believing you are carving freely. And in mirrors from ahead, and tomorrow's echo, you felt it most intimately. The reflections of who you might become are already shaping who you believe you have always been. The present is not original. It is resonance, an echo of futures reverberating backward into today. So what does this mean for you, here, now? It means your story is never complete. It means the memories you hold are still in motion, waiting for tomorrow's decisions to rewrite them. The arguments you regret may yet transform into lessons. The pain you carry may yet be reframed as preparation. The triumphs you celebrate may yet dissolve into illusions. The past is not dead. It is alive, a manuscript being edited by futures you cannot yet see. It also means your choices matter in a deeper way than you imagined. They do not only shape tomorrow, they shape yesterday too. Every decision you make collapses the ambiguity of your past, rearranging what it always meant. You are not only authoring your future, you are editing your history. And yet, even this is not final. Tomorrow will arrive and rewrite again. The past you believe today will not be the same. Past you believe in a year, you will recall differently, feel differently, narrate differently. Each new self you become will reach backward and sculpt the self you believe you have always been. Perhaps this is the deepest paradox. You are both the witness and the editor, both the reader and the writer of your life. You are not just living through time. You are time folding back upon itself, rewriting as it goes. And so I must ask you, just once, as promised, in the silence of this loop, what time is it for you now, and where are you as you listen? Notice the strangeness of answering. The question is posed in the present, but your answer will soon belong to the past, and even that past will not stay fixed. Tomorrow's self may recall this moment differently, will fold your answer into a story you have not yet lived, will remember what you said, not as you said it, but as it needs to be remembered. Even this moment, even this very question, is already being rewritten. That is the loop. That is the paradox. That is the quiet, recursive hum of existence. You are not the sum of your past. You are the resonance of your future, echoing backward into the person you believe you were. Every step you take is both memory and prophecy, both archive and rehearsal. The self you will become is already pulling at you, shaping the story behind you, convincing you that it was always so. Perhaps the past never truly existed. Perhaps it has only ever been the quiet draft of a future still writing you. And if that is true, then nothing is sealed. Not your memories, not your regrets, not even your identity. All of it is provisional, waiting for tomorrow's echo to give it meaning. So drift with this thought as you fall deeper into it. Your future is already here, quietly rewriting your past. And when tomorrow arrives, it will tell you that it had always been this way. Tomorrow sits, echo. Every sound you hear arrives with a delay. Light takes time to travel, sound takes time to vibrate the air, and even touch takes milliseconds to reach your brain. You never experience the world in real time. You experience echoes, signals arriving slightly after the fact, assembled into a seamless present by your mind. But what if the same principle applies not only to perception but to time itself? What if what you call now is already tomorrow's echo, whispered backward into today? Think of those uncanny moments when you sense something before it happens. A word forms in your mouth just as another person speaks it. You move aside before danger reveals itself. You dream of a place before visiting it. These moments feel like coincidences, but perhaps they are echoes, faint reverberations of futures already unfolding, reaching back to shape your present. Physics hints at this. In time-symmetric equations, the future is as real as the past. Just as sound waves echo in both directions, time's structure may allow signals to reverberate backward as well as forward. Tomorrow's echo may already be rippling through you, shaping your instincts, bending your memories, convincing you that the present is original when it is really a resonance. Psychology reflects this too. Your brain predicts constantly, filling in gaps, generating experiences before they arrive. When reality catches up, you mistake the forecast for perception. The prediction was the echo, and the present was only its confirmation. Every sensation you live, may already be tomorrow's shadow rehearsed, your mind echoing futures into the story of now. Memory bends beneath this echo. Once the future arrives, your past rearranges to match. You recall clues you missed, feelings you always had, signs that seem obvious in hindsight. This is not discovery. It is retroactive editing, the echo of tomorrow rippling backward, altering yesterday to prepare the narrative. The echo is not just faint sound, it is architecture, reshaping the entire story. Even identity vibrates with this resonance. Who you think you are today is already tuned to the self you will become tomorrow. The echo of that future self reverberates into your choices, your feelings, your recollections. You are not only the product of where you have been, you are the resonance of who you will be, vibrating backward into the person you believe you are now. Consider how déjà vu fits here. It is not memory misfiring. It is the recognition of an echo, the uncanny sensation of having already lived what is just unfolding. The echo precedes the moment, and when the moment arrives, the alignment feels eerie. Déjà vu is not confusion. It is contact with tomorrow's resonance. Even culture senses this truth. Prophecies, omens, rituals, all are attempts to listen for echoes. Dreams interpreted as visions, coincidences elevated into signs, symbols treated as destiny. They are ways of acknowledging that tomorrow does not wait silently. It reverberates, seeding today with its aftertones. This does not strip you of freedom. It reframes it. Freedom may not mean inventing from scratch, but tuning yourself to the echoes you wish to amplify. Some echoes are faint with despair, others with hope. Some reverberate as cycles, others as transformations. The echo you listen to becomes the story that rewrites your past. Perhaps this is why you sometimes feel haunted by futures that never come. You carry echoes of paths you never walked, the love you didn't pursue, the risk you didn't take, the life you didn't live. These futures still reverberate, shaping how you remember your present, even if they never become real. The echo of tomorrow includes both what will be and what could have been. And so you live not in the raw present, but in a resonance chamber, surrounded by echoes flowing in both directions. The past reverberates forward, the future reverberates backward, and you stand in the middle, mistaking the overlapping tones for reality. So pause for a moment. Listen closely. That instinct you feel, that shiver of recognition, that sudden certainty, it may not be coming from behind. It may be tomorrow's echo, already vibrating through you, already reshaping who you believe you were, already deciding who you will be. Perhaps the present is nothing more than the music of time itself, a chord struck across past and future, with tomorrow's note always humming faintly beneath today.